Welcome to this meeting of the Maidenhead Development Management Committee on the 24th of April 2025. My name is Councillor Shah Martin and I will be chairing this meeting. This meeting has been held in person via Zoom and streamed live to the public on YouTube. I remind all attendees that participation in the meeting indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live and acknowledgement that after the meeting it will continue to be available in the public domain. We are not expecting the fire alarm to sound this evening. However, it does, may I ask you to leave in an orderly fashion and rendezvous across the road outside the library next to the fountain. Firstly, it would be useful if all voting members and officers could introduce themselves so that the public are aware of who is in the meeting and the role they are undertaking. So if I could go to my left, please.
I'm Adrian Raitt, the Assistant Director of Planning, here to advise the committee.
I'm James Cross, Major Sites Team Leader.
Mohammed Salim, Major Projects Principal Planner, presenting to the items tonight.
I'm Catriona Herbert, Legal Officer to the committee this evening.
Councillor Kashmir Singh, representing Riverside Ward, voting member of the panel.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Councillor Leo Walters, a voting member of the panel.
Hello, good evening. Councillor Gurch Singh, voting member of the panel.
Maggie Borough, voting member of the panel. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's Councillor Jack Douglas, voting member of the panel.
Hi, evening. Councillor Gary Reeves from Cox Green Ward and voting member of the panel.
Mikey Lloyd, Democratic Services Officer and Clerk to the committee.
Thank you. And online we have Councillor Taylor. Is there anyone else online? No. I request that meeting participants do not speak unless I specifically invite you to do so. Once I've invited you to speak, before you do so, please state your name and the capacity in which you are speaking if appropriate. I will also ask officers to speak at appropriate times. If any individual attempts to disrupt the meeting, I'm able to use my powers in the Constitution to adjourn the meeting or have the individual removed. I would also like to remind councillors that to improve our time and effectiveness as a committee, I will ask you to limit the repetition of points or questions that have already been raised by others. Where possible, please forward all new points or questions which you would like raised during your request to speak. We will now start on the agenda items. Firstly, do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we have an apology from Councillor Hill, and then just to note as well, Councillor Taylor given apologies, but she is still attending virtually online. She is aware that she can participate in the debates, but she is unable to vote on any application this evening.
Thank you. And do we have any declarations of interest? No. Councillor Walters?
Madam Chairman, what is it? I did speak out years ago against this Kimbers Lane development. It was years ago. I declared interest the last time it came before the panel, but I do come tonight with an open mind.
Thank you, Councillor Walters. And I've got a declaration myself of I've been speaking to the objector, but I come with an open mind. That brings me on to agenda item number 3. Are we happy with the minutes? Agreed? Yeah. Thank you. And this brings me on to the agenda item number 4, which is application number 24-02786, and that's Kimbers Lane and Maidenhead. If I could hand over to James Cross for the presentation. Thank you.
There, can you all hear me clearly? Good. Don't want to get halfway through and you can't hear me. So So item number 1 tonight is the full planning application for 225 dwellings, together with access, landscaping, open space, parking and infrastructure, associated infrastructure at the land south of Kimbers Lane, Maidenhead. So the recommendation tonight is to grant planning permission subject to the completion of a satisfactory legal agreement and subject to the conditions listed in section 14 below in the report, and any such amendments as considered appropriate to ensure the acceptable implementation of the planning permission. So in terms of updates, the update report has been circulated to members prior to this meeting, and it's also been published online, so it's available for all to view. So in terms of the structure of the presentation tonight, I'm going to take you through the overview of the recommendation, the proposed development, specific matters in different items we need to go through, the infrastructure delivery that will be yielded from the development, and then conclusions and recommendations. So the recommendation comprises, so the application site falls within an allocated housing site. The local planning authority is unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and therefore the purposes of assessing this development tonight, the tilted balance applies. The tilted balance requires development to be approved unless the harms arising significantly and demonstrably, that's a 2-limbed requirement, outweigh the benefits of the scheme when taken as a whole. Concerns have been raised by the tree officer in respect to the impacts of trees, and this has been addressed through the use of the tree protection measure conditions that's set out at the bottom of the recommendation for you. Third parties have objected regarding the loss of access to adjacent land, and this has been addressed through the use of section 106 obligations. I've got a couple of slides to take you through that this evening. Concerns have also been raised regarding the design and the prominence of flats, and this has been assessed by officers and is considered to be acceptable on balance following the pre-application advice provided to the applicants. So in summary, the harms that are found have not been considered to be significant and demonstrable in nature when taking into account the overall benefit to the scheme, and we therefore recommend that planning permission be approved. So in terms of the proposed development, so the application proposes 225 residential units, which includes 30% affordable housing and 5% custom-built dwellings. It comprises an extension of the phase 1 development located to the east. I don't know whether you can see my cursor there. That's the development to the east. And vehicular access is taken through the phase 1 site to the east. So it comes off Harvest Hill Road there, down through the phase 1 site and into phase 2. Pedestrian and cycle access is facilitated to the north, just up here. It's a connection point onto Kimbers Lane. And that also provides wider connections through the Berkeley Home Scheme to the north. Open space in B&G land is found to the south of the site, and that links into the phase 1 open space in B&G land as well. So the building heights plan that's proposed shows 4-storey buildings along the western boundary of the site, and that's those shown in pink there. You've then got 2.5-storey buildings shown in that salmon colour, which I think comes up better on your screen than mine. And the remainder of the site comprises 2-storey buildings. And these heights broadly reflect the heights of the adjacent phase 1 development. So trying to create a consistent development between both parcels. And the heights that have been proposed reflect the feedback provided by the officers throughout the pre-application process. That's also the input of the council's externally appointed design consultant as well. And the purpose of having a variety of heights is to provide variety in the streetscape. To give you an idea of what the development could look like, and these are CGI images, they're not verified visual images, but it's there to give a flavour of what this could come forward looking like. So the top image on your screen there is an image looking towards the western extent of Kimbers Lane, with the retention of the trees there, creating a fairly rural appearance to that lane. And then the bottom image there shows the viewpoint looking into the site, which then obviously runs down the western boundary of the site on the right of that picture. And then moving to some illustrations of what the development would look like in the actual the development itself. The top left image there shows the provision of the properties. You've got generous setbacks from the road there, tree-lined street planting, lots of low-lying hedging, etc. So a verdant character has been sought by the applicants in that regard. Then the image on the bottom right shows the public open space to the south of the site looking north to the houses. And this indicates how this could come forward. That's all secured by the landscaping conditions, so we can finalise details with these things. But it shows an intent as to what could be possible at that detailed stage. So the scheme forms the infill of one of the final parcels of the Southwest Maidenhead allocation. And the site is highly interconnected to adjacent parcels through pedestrian, cyclist and vehicular connectivity. And you can see that from the plethora of lines there shown on the plan. So just for reference, that's the phase 2 site there. And you've got accesses to the local centre in the golf course application site there. So a very highly connected development for basket economy trips. You know, when you want a chocolate bar in the evening, you want to walk to it, you can do basically, that's the point. And there's a priority given to the pedestrian and cyclists for connecting into the southern local centre, which is found in adjacent parcels. So we're seeing in the proposed development a cohesive development coming forward. So in summary of the proposed development, the development provides for 225 dwellings on an allocated housing site within the borough local plan. There's a mix of building heights from 2 to 4 storeys across the house types. The layout has been driven through feedback provided by officers in the pre-application discussions, and that includes a design officer. And the starting point is that the principle of a residential-led development is considered acceptable and is in accordance with development plan policies. So I'll now move on to sort of specific detailed matters, which are all set out in your reports. But in terms of housing mix, so the open market housing mix features a greater proportion of 3-bed properties, that's there on the screen, and there's less 1 and 4 bedroom properties. And there is a reason for this, which I'll go through now. So the focus of the scheme has been to provide family dwellings, which is suitable for different occupants. That could be couples, families, retirees. And in our experience as a local authority, the 2s and 3 bedroom apartments tend to meet the widest needs for occupants. So it appeals to downsizers, people getting on the property ladder for the first time, et cetera, et cetera. So when you look at 4 bedroom dwellings, that's a very specific part of the sector that would require a property like that. But 2s and 3s, you kind of capture the wider audience. The higher percentage of the 3 bedroom properties, which is there, is driven from the inclusion of 3 bedroom apartments at the request of officers. So to give you a bit of background as to how this scheme's evolved, the apartment blocks on the western side of the building were predominantly 1 and 2 bedroom properties. That's been provided there because there's got to be sound attenuation and a noise barrier from the A404M. But we didn't want to, as officers, just see 1 and 2 bedroom apartments because there's a rationale to having more apartment blocks nearer to the centre of the wider allocation. So the trade-off that we put back to the applicants was that if we need these apartment blocks for the site-specific constraints, we'd want to see more of a family housing or potential family housing proposed. So the applicants went away, they reduced the amount of 1-bedroom properties and put in more 3-bedroom properties within those apartment blocks. They did that at the request of the officers. But the symptom of that is that it does skew the housing mix numbers. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the housing mix numbers might look slightly skewed, but there's a rationale, there's a thought process, and it's come from the advice from officers in the application process. We very much were pushing the applicants to provide 3-bedroom apartments because we thought they were more appropriate over 1-bedroom units. And again, that's to do with market demands, where 1-bedroom units will be typically occupied by a first-time buyer, whereas 3-bedroom apartments will appeal to downsizers or people who just want single living. So it seemed like a positive trade-off. And then finally, the affordable housing mix has been reviewed by the council's affordable housing officer, and it's deemed to be acceptable. And the applicants reliably informed me that they are in a contract or got interest from an RSL to take on these units. That will be tied into the provider of the phase 1 development. So we've got comfort that delivery will take place with that proposed mix. So the scheme also provides for custom and self-built dwellings, and 5% of the open market dwellings are secured as custom built dwellings on the site. Each custom built dwelling has 3 varieties of floor plan layouts that a purchaser can choose from to suit their needs. So to give you some context as to how the scheme's evolved, that was originally submitted with just 2 options, but we used to actually to have an actual mix and to have choices, it's got to be at least 3. And there are only so many ways you can sort of cut the cake when it comes to dividing up a floor plan. In reality, you generally have a bedroom, a living room at the front or a living room at the back. There's not many other ways you can go about it. So we've just given some more arrangements in terms of the three options there. And then each custom self-built dwelling will have 3 varieties of external appearance, and that's within the confines of the wider appearance of the site. So what we don't want to be seeing is just random punctuations of odd designs. We want there to be consistency, but we want people to have choice in what they choose and select. So the applicants have brought forward various plot passports, and it shows you here 3 examples of how a property could be finished down to the purchaser's specification and requirements. And then the corresponding Section 106 agreement secures the provision of a marketing strategy, which requires the units to be marketed for a period of 12 months. And that's a standard period across all of our schemes in the borough. So moving on now to trees and landscaping. So the trees around the boundary of the application site that contribute to the character of the area are safeguarded through the tree protection measures condition. There's 16 trees that are set to be removed, which are category B or lower. As a rule of thumb, as a council, we don't normally try to allow for category A or B trees to be lost. C's and U's are generally of the lower value. But I've just set out the table there, which is provided by the applicants, which demonstrates there's only 1 category B tree being lost. The remainder are category C and category U's, which is what's quite commonplace when we look at development sites of this. But then juxtaposing that loss of trees with the proposed planting, there's going to be 145 trees to be proposed to be planted in the indicative landscaping scheme. And that will obviously assist with the enhancements to biodiversity net gain across the site as well. So for those of you who enjoy maths, that I'm reliably informed that's a 9-to-1 planting ratio. So, but don't quiz me on that, I haven't got my calculator out. So in terms of the landscaping details that have come forward, full landscaping plans will be secured via the planning conditions. So it gives us flexibility to get some more detail out of that. But we've seen provisional landscaping plans which give us enough comfort that this can be achieved on the site. The areas in front of the apartment blocks provide for opportunities for landscaping. So you'll see there where my cursor is, there's an area there before the pathways and the road begins, which provides a good depth for apartment buildings. So when we look to the apartment buildings, the appropriateness of that, we have to look at it in the round. And we've seen it actually with apartment buildings, you get greater setbacks. That gives you greater opportunities for more landscaping in front of those buildings. And all the streets are tree lined as well, which you can see from that site section there. So it's a very verdant character that can be established. And again, that helps with the number of trees being replanted. And then the application is required to maximise the on-site landscaping to enhance the biodiversity net gain values of the site. So from a commercial side of things for the applicant and for the aspirations of the local planning authority, we all end up at the same sort of outcome. We're all trying to achieve the same outcome there. So we've got plenty of comfort to satisfy ourselves that we can get an appropriate landscaping scheme, and that's all secured via condition. So in terms of public open space, the development is required, obviously being part of the wider Southwest Maidenhead allocation, to be collectively master planned, having considerations of adjacent developments. And the application accords with the local area play requirements on the site and wider open space standards. Now, the scheme itself will generate a locally equipped area of play. So that's a leap for everyone listening tonight on the phase on the phase 2 scheme. But the phase 1 scheme down here provides a leap anyway. So as part of the pre-application discussions with officers, we agreed that it would be a bit odd to have a line in the sand, if that makes sense, between phase 1 and phase 2 and have 2 competing leaps. So the applicants have got permission to enhance the leap on phase 1. So it becomes a destination space for people to come there. And the reason for that is that it encourages more people to access that play facility, create social community and social cohesion from there, and basically encourage integration in community. So it becomes a destination place to go to if you've got young families or you've got kids you want to let off some steam, really. So the provision of those enhancements will be triggered in the corresponding Section 106 legal agreement. So it's got permission, but the implementation of that will get secured through this legal agreement. So in terms of transport and highways, the vehicular access is taken off of the Harvest Hill Road through the phase 1 development. So where my cursor is there, that's the vehicular access. That's been approved, obviously under phase one by the committee. And then the scheme will come through down south there and then head west into this phase two site. Non-vehicular pedestrian and cycle access points are provided to the north of the site, which are up here. And that provides wider connections through the Berkeley development scheme, also to the west over the A4M, and also along Kimbers Lane as well. There's a lot of permeability and opportunities to use non-vehicular modes of transport as well. The parking requirements have been assessed by the local highways authority, and they've been found to meet the parking standards set out in the council's parking strategy. And all properties will be fitted with a 7 kilowatt EV charger, which is secured via planning condition. And that's a higher level of charging than what will be required under current Part S building regs. So it's an enhanced specification. We've seen a number of correspondence from third parties, which we want to address in this slide here, regarding third party land and how that correlates to the planning decisions tonight. I'm sure, Catherine, you might want to just jump in if at any point if you want to clarify any points. But there's a strip of land here in the middle of the site, which falls outside of the applicant's red line boundary, and it's not in the applicant's ownership. So the applicants are the freeholder of the land to the west there on phase two, and to the land to the east, but they're not the freeholders of that site. And that site, we understand from the third party representations, is used as a sewage treatment works, serving these existing properties up here to the northwest. So what we've secured, taking this into consideration in the corresponding legal agreement, is a pink easement strip, which hopefully you can see on the screen there, along the back boundary of that site. The hatched areas of pink here would be areas where they can't fetter any access. So for servicing and maintenance arrangements, that will always be kept free. And then there's a further point down here where the third parties can enter that land as well. So there's no amount of sterilising the land or any ability to not provide access to them. And then you've got a brown line there, which runs diagonally across the site, where we've put no built development. And that's to basically allow that if there were any maintenance issues where the site or the land would need to be dug up, then that's available as well. But that is all dealt with via separate property law and separate legal agreements between both parties. It's not a planning consideration, but we've gone overly diligent, if this makes sense, to make sure safeguards are put in place with the information that we know. So in terms of the summary of the points that are detail points, so the mix of dwellings is considered suitable for the site location and site constraints. The protection of existing trees is secured through the planning conditions, and additional tree planting with a 9-fold increase is secured. There's no policy conflict that we've identified that would amount to a significant and demonstrable harm in nature. So moving on to infrastructure delivery. So set out in the box in the bottom half of that screen there shows what the corresponding legal agreement would secure in terms of infrastructure. So in this instance, it would provide 30% affordable housing across the site, provision of custom self-built dwellings, including the marketing strategy, the provision of an infrastructure contribution, which covers a wide range of topics that includes things like health facilities and off-site highways improvements. The legal agreement will secure 10% biodiversity net gain and the provision of open space and its corresponding management. And it will also trigger the implementation of the enhanced LEAP on the phase one development. So moving on to conclusions and recommendations. I can only apologise for the length of this slide, but this is fundamentally how we have to balance up these factors. So I think it's quite an important thing to run through with members tonight, because this will hopefully help you with your debate subsequently on this item. So we've looked at the benefits of the scheme and we've looked at the harms of the scheme. And we've just set these out really clearly for everyone to consider. Again, these is what the officers deem to be the benefits and the harms of the scheme. Obviously, everyone's entitled to come to their own view, but this gives you a starter for 10 in terms of weighing these factors. So the benefits of the scheme would include the provision of purpose family-built housing on an allocated housing site. It would provide a valuable contribution to the delivery of the borough's housing numbers. It would allow for early delivery of affordable housing needs, which is set out and meet the needs set out in the borough's housing register. It would provide for custom self-built housing, which would meet the borough's statutory requirement against the housing register for meeting the significant number of plots that we've got on there. It would provide for sustainably constructed housing, which would meet the latest building regulation standards. And the Section 106 agreement provides for the carbon offset contribution as well. You've got the provision of EV charging points, which is the highest spec to the 7 kilowatt standard to all new dwellings. There's the ability for the site to be built out and delivered relatively quickly, and that's because phase 1's under construction, and 9 times out of 10 developers will just carry on building as they go through the process. And I'm reliably informed that the applicants are the freeholders of the sites. There's not a contractual position or a contractual requirement that would create a delay in delivery, which you can often see with other sites. It will allow for the provision of ecological enhancements through the application of biodiversity net gain, and that's a minimum of 10%. It will create employment in the construction of dwellings. And again, just referring you back to the phase 1 scheme that's currently getting built out, it's generally advantageous to have a phase 2 being built out in quick succession, because it means that the employment for those trades can continue through both sites. So it gives greater certainty to trades basically in our area. It would incur incidental expenditure within the local economy through the occupation of the dwellings. That's all the basket economy trips, food shops, etc., all the things we do on a day-to-day basis. It would generate incidental expenditure associated with house moves for future occupants. So things like removal companies, solicitors, household fixtures and fittings, the dreaded trip to IKEA that we all get forced to go when we buy a new house to get a new sideboard. But these are all things that are benefits to the economy that generate from housing developments. It will provide for an additional enhanced public open space that will be publicly accessible to the residents of the borough. And it will provide additional tree planting that's at a ratio of 9:1, which will also enhance biodiversity across the site. So then in terms of the harms that the officers have identified in the process, or should I say lack of policy compliance. So we've demonstrated that the housing mix is not absolutely in accordance with the SPD, but we've deemed that to be acceptable owing to the site-specific constraints. So housing mix policy should always be a target, but you've got to calibrate those with the site-specific factors that you've got on the site. So there's always a bit of variance, but you don't want to be too far out of the aspirations in the SPD. And then the other harm that we've identified is the provision of 4-storey buildings outside of local centres. But we've deemed that to be acceptable because we've got to have a structure on that western boundary. Given the 5-year housing land supply position of the council, it's advantageous to use that for properties. And it's also allowed us to basically introduce 3-bedroom apartments, which you wouldn't normally see in an apartment building, which obviously gives opportunities for things like downsizers, elderly accommodation. And obviously we've rehearsed at length in this committee about the need for downsizing and the requirements for an elderly population in our borough. So in terms of the tilted balance, this application is subject to the tilted balance under paragraph 11D2. That requires decision makers to have a much higher threshold if you were minded to refuse the application. And it requires decision takers, and these decision takers are yourselves tonight, to be able to clearly demonstrate that the benefits of the development are outweighed by the harms that are both significant and demonstrable in nature. So that's a 2-limb thread to satisfy. So you've got to be able to demonstrate it, but the level of harm's got to be significant as well when you weigh it against the benefits of the proposal. And officers have considered the benefits of the proposed development as a whole, and we've considered that when weighing these benefits against the impacts of the development, officers conclude these impacts do not outweigh the benefits. That's obviously covered on my previous slide. So we therefore recommend that planning permission is approved. That's my presentation, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Before I call up the speakers, can we just bring Councillor Taylor online because she wanted to declare her interest?
Hi, thanks, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, can hear you perfectly.
Thank you. I didn't make a declaration because being a non-voting member of this panel, because I'm online, I didn't think I had to, but I have been advised by legal that it's probably best. It's only for transparency. In September last year, I had an online Teams call with the developers Taylor Wimpey, who talked me through their plans for phase 2 to give me an opportunity to ask any questions. But I come to panel with an open mind. I can't vote, but anyway.
Thank you, councillor Taylor. That brings me to the next step in the meeting, which is to call up the speakers. And the first speaker on this one is Anne Barrett, please. And when you're ready, is it the left button? Yeah, it's okay. We don't need to press anything, Anne. You have 3 minutes and you have a 1 minute warning. Thank you.
Start that. Good evening, Anne Barrett. We are the owners of the sewage farm, which sits sandwiched in between the phase 1 and phase 2 development. In 2017, we had a visit to our house by councillors Coppinger and Wilson, later followed by Barbara Richardson, who told us that the sewage farm had to go as the land was now going to be part of the new development, a big master plan. The sewage farm was to be a part of it, and the sewage farm could not in any way whatsoever be kept in the middle of a brand new development. They told us that the houses that the sewage farm served would be connected to the mains. The sewage farm is actually a potentially dangerous area with 2.5 metre pools with contaminated water, and seems a bit of a strange centrepiece for a brand new housing development. We do not know whether the councillors who approved phase 1 were made aware of the existence of the sewage works by the officers at the time. And the sewage farm is under policy EP1 covering matters like sewage works. It states that sewage works should not be sited within the curtilage of houses, but the plans tonight include 16 houses with sewage literally at the end of their gardens. Policy IF7 on sewage states that development proposals must demonstrate development would not lead to problems for existing users. This will lead to insurmountable problems for existing users because the applicant proposes to build over our pipes, which is a protected easement, and to surround the site, preventing proper access for maintenance equipment. Breaching IF7 and EP1, especially where the effects impact long-established legal rights, is a demonstrable and significant harm that outweighs the benefits, and therefore the tilted balance is accordingly not applicable in this instance. In phase 1, there was a master plan approved by councillors showing a second access road going through the sewage farm for east-west connections. And this followed objections from the previous owners, where the second road now has vanished. The first stage owners were proposing 130 houses, and it was deemed necessary to have this access road. And now, with a 73% increase in houses, this is no longer deemed necessary. So not sure what the rationale in that is, because it's quite a significant difference. And also the emergency access could be, utilised through that road, as Kimbers Lane was erroneously numbered as 3.8 metres and it's 3.1 metres.
Anne, you're out of time.
My time up?
Your time up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Could I call up the next speaker? Joe Unsworth, please. You have 3 minutes, 1 minute warning. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Jo Unsworth. I'm the planning agent acting on behalf of Taylor Wimpey. We fully support your officer's recommendation to approve this detailed application, which forms phase 2, as you've heard, of Taylor Wimpey's development, Harvest Hill, and would contribute a further 225 homes within the South West Maidenhead allocation. The principles of the design, layout and housing mix accord with the guidance received by your officers through pre-application discussions since summer last year, in order to reflect the permitted phase 1 scheme, and in the case of the location and orientation of the apartment buildings, to mitigate noise from the A404. The remainder of the development comprises houses in line with the objectives of the SPD. The design, form and height of the proposed houses and apartment buildings mirrors the houses and apartments already permitted and under construction on phase 1. The scheme before you would deliver 68 affordable dwellings in a mixture of houses and apartments, including 1, 2, 3 and 4-bedroom affordable homes. Together with the affordable homes provided on the permitted phase 1, this is a total of 133 affordable dwellings to be provided across the 2 phases. Taylor Wimpey has recently entered into contract with Red Kite Community Housing to deliver the affordable homes on phase 1, and they are supportive of the phase 2 proposals. In total, over 1/3 of the site would be designated as open space, also delivering biodiversity benefits. As you've heard, 145 new trees are proposed, which is a ratio of 9 new trees for every single tree to be lost, noting that 15 of the 16 trees to be removed are of low quality. Each home would meet the NDSS standards and incorporate a range of energy efficient measures which will bring the benefits of lower energy bills and running costs for future residents. Phase 1 is currently under construction and Taylor Wimpey are the freehold owners of phase 2. As such, they're keen to deliver these new homes as quickly as possible. It's estimated that construction of phase 2
remaining.
could start in summer this year, with the first homes completed in autumn 2026. Thus, the site offers an immediate contribution towards the delivery of market and affordable housing to aid the borough's land supply. In addition, the development would generate significant financial contributions to the Borough Council under both SIL and Section 106. These contributions will be used to fund local and strategic infrastructure in line with the approach favoured by the Council in the adopted SPD. You've heard from the owner of the adjoining sewage farm, who has submitted comments and has also written to Taylor Wimpey's CEO in respect of the application. We can confirm that all the planning points have already been addressed in the application and the real estate points raised are not relevant to the determination of this application. We therefore hope you can support these proposals in line with your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to open this up to the floor now. We do have quite a busy agenda this evening, so if we could start with asking any questions for clarification purposes first before we enter to debate. So is there anyone who would like to speak? Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions for the officers. First, the sewage works, which is in the centre of this proposed development of 225 houses. The land isn't owned by Taylor Wimpey at present, and it's in breach of NPPF 124 because it will be surrounded by homes and their gardens. It's not connected to any sewage works of Thames Water. There is a requirement, when originally it was approved, to have a second road which was required to achieve the BLP requirement at the time. So how does this match with that? Thank you.
So I think if I come in on the first one, which is about the sewage works, the sewage works is on separate land ownership. It's an existing sewage works. It's not within the curtilage of any of the proposed residential dwellings, so it wouldn't be contrary to any of the policies in the development plan. The site proposal has a contamination condition on it. So if there were any contamination on the land within the development site, that would be dealt with by the contamination condition and the applicant would have to deal with it. The applicant wouldn't be responsible for any contamination on land outside of their ownership. The other point, James, was about the fact that in previous iterations of the master plan, there was an access route shown through, and I'll pass that one over to you to deal with if I can.
Yeah, so with master plans, they're a guidance document and they set out how things could come forward, but they're obviously not absolute. But what we haven't had as a local authority is any applications to secure that route. So we can only, obviously, with we say this in every committee, you can only ever assess an application that's before you. So we can't make decisions on what is, what might be different. We would be in definitely a different conversation tonight if we had an application on that land showing a route through. Obviously, that would be a consideration for us as well. But the simple fact is, there is no application on that land to demonstrate any other alternative scenario. But we have got sufficient routes through the site, which has been shown in the proposed layout. That has been assessed by the local highways authority. And those routes all conform with the building regulation standards for that. And that was set out in the updated consultation response from the local highways authority.
Come back on that.
Yeah.
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Originally, phase 1 and phase 2 was supposed to come together, and there's supposed to be an exit road from there. RBWM outsourced it to a private company. The minimum width of the road needs to be to allow emergency vehicles such as fire engines, which are minimum 26 tons to 40 tons, to be 3.8 to 5.2 meters. This is not the case here. It's only 3.1 meters. So how does that correlate with that? Thank you.
Just to clarify, the road we're talking about, is that Kimbers Lane or the internal road within the site?
Yes.
The exit road. So there's two exit roads on the site. There's one that goes through the middle of the site, which is like the main street, the street hierarchy. That's been assessed by the highways consultants acting as the local highways authority, and it's been confirmed to be within standards. There were obviously third-party comments questioning about the suitability of Kimbers Lane, but that's a secondary emergency access in the eventuality that the primary access coming through the site were blocked. There's obviously an option to come through Kimbers Lane. But again, we would be talking about a very, very, very bad day in society where that road was blocked in the event of an emergency. But there's a backup solution there, which is kind of going above and beyond what is required under the standards. And that's all been confirmed by the local highways authority in their consultation responses.
Has to be viable to allow emergency vehicles to go through, because it's going to be 450 homes. It's not if, when that access will be required. So you can't say, oh, if and when. It will be needed at some point. And we can't make that decision today to allow something when that possibility arises, that we approve something on that basis.
So you've got a primary emergency access coming through the site, which meets all the standards. So there's nothing more we could require or impose beyond that. That's the standard that planning applications have to meet, and that's what this planning application does meet.
Okay, thank you.
I think just to come in quickly on that point as well, I think it's probably worth me mentioning and probably quite prudent given the other item on the agenda tonight. This discussion about the importance of a secondary emergency access is one we've well rehearsed, and we've been through a planning appeal on and had a decision from the planning inspector which took into account the odds of that access route being needed in the decision making. I think given that was on the outline permission for the other item on the agenda tonight, and some of the members will have been familiar with the discussions that happened there, I think it is pertinent to raise the fact that we need to be mindful of other decisions and other outcomes we've had on decisions when we're assessing these matters. And that was in the lines of, it's there as an emergency access, it's beneficial, but the odds of you needing an emergency access are very low, and you have to take into account the probability of it being needed in your planning balancing exercise.
Councillor Singh?
Can I come back on that? I don't think councillors and officers can take this lightly, if there is an emergency, there are injuries or deaths, we will be responsible.
No, sorry, Chair.
If that happens, we cannot take this lightly.
Councillor Singh, can I
It's
just bring
not
in-
precedent.
Can I just bring in legal just on this one point, please?
Through you, be absolutely crystal clear that there is no liability. I'm not accepting the premise of the point, but just as a general legal point, there's no liability in law that flows from the grant of planning permission when it's in accordance with policy and taken as a whole would be lawfully granted if members chose to follow the officer recommendation. So I'd like members to disregard that comment. That's a very clear and well-proven aspect of law when it comes to planning decisions. You are never going to be legally liable as decision makers. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. Did you want to come back, Councillor Singh?
Not just legally, but morally. If something like that happens, we are morally going to be held to account for our decisions today, for the future events that do occur. So it may not be legally, but morally, we've got to take the right decision today.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Before I go to Councillor Waters, does anybody else have any comments on Councillor Kashmir Singh's point? Did anybody else have any points related to Councillor? I'm just trying to speed things up a little bit with that actual point on access. No. Okay, Councillor Brow, sorry.
Yes, I am concerned about the access to the sewage farm, obviously, and contamination. And I know the officer said there won't be any worries about the contamination. The other thing I'm worried about is obviously Kimbers Lane is a very, very narrow road. I mean, how many houses we're going to have there and access? Okay, but there is emergency access, but end of the day, they have to go into Kimbers Lane to get into the main road, an emergency. I agree. Is there a provision for sewage and water facilities for all these extra houses in this development?
Go ahead, yeah.
Sorry, if I may just be clear, when we're talking about the reference to this, the third-party land, and there is an element of sewage works on there, but this is not a statutory undertaker facility. This is serving a small group of dwellings locally. So the question, I think, if with respect, Councillor Brow, if I could just be clear about what the question is that you're asking, because there is a separate matter. There's an existing facility there, very small scale, on private land. Separately, you mentioned provision for sewerage and water in relation to the new houses. So I just want to be very clear what the question is that's being asked and not to overlap the two issues. Thank you.
I'm not really happy about the sewage works, their access, and they are obviously our planning policies 1F1 and 1F2. So I know it's right next to the, going to be right next to the development. So I am worried about contamination and people living there. It's the one who's going to suffer, not us.
Thank you, Councillor Brow. Councillor Waters, Councillor Taylor did have her hand up before you online, so I'm just going to go to her quickly and then I'll come to you next.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly, thank you.
Great. I just have a question about everything that's been said about the sewage works. Given what's been said, currently, obviously now it's open fields around the sewage works, and I have seen photos of the location. I just wanted to ask, given that the development is happening around the sewage works, can I ask how the site will be secured and whose responsibility that would be, whether it would be Taylor Wimpey or the private landowner? Because I'm quite concerned about access. You know, teenagers will be teenagers, people will be people. What are the conditions to make sure that the site is secure and not accessible apart from maintenance? Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Taylor. Did you want to come in on that?
Yes, I'll come in and so on. So, I mean, obviously there are matters here that are private land matters between the two adjoining landowners, which aren't planning matters. In terms of ensuring security of their own land, that would be for the private landowner, although I would expect that we have conditions and details of landscaping for boundary treatments, etc. So that would deal with making sure that there was appropriate fencing, etc. on the boundaries as it's provided from the new residential accommodation to the site. There are provisions there, as we've said, that go above and beyond making sure access is maintained for the sewage works, for maintenance, etc. But that is really a private land matter between the two landowners. So that's kind of going above beyond and certainly doesn't become an issue to the grant of planning permission.
Apologies if I may just through you just add to that, and it's not a matter for the committee, but there's liability in law under occupiers liability relating to land ownership of private land and hazards on that land. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. Councillor Walters.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Am I on the thing? Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I share the views expressed so far of the other councillors about this sewage works. I've got a plan here that shows the sewage works sort of specifically, and it's, you know, it's surrounded by houses. I wouldn't want to live there, surrounded by a sewage works, I must admit. And in 3.2 in the officer's report, there seems to be a reluctance to say that there are sewage works there. Yes. It says there is a central belt of trees which is referred to as, in quotes, sewage works. Why the quotes? Is it a sewage works or isn't it?
Yeah.
3.2 on page 12.
Yeah, I can read it out for the benefit of everyone today. So it's paragraph 3.2, is that correct, Councillor Walters?
Yes.
3.2. So it says there is a central belt of trees which is referred to as the sewage works within the third party consultation responses, which forms land outside of the application site and outside of the applicant's land ownership, but sits between the application site and existing phase 1 development. So what we're doing there is confirming the status of that land as to what we know at that time of writing that report, and that's what we know.
Why the, no, just hang on a minute. Why the quotes?
Sorry, Councillor Walters, I missed that point.
Is it a sewage works or isn't it? Is it a sewage works or isn't it?
But I'm not an inspector for ascertaining what is and isn't a sewage works. It's been submitted by third parties as a sewage works, which is what we refer to in the report quite accurately, which is the land is referred to as sewage works.
Yes, but why the attempt to disguise what it actually is by putting in inverted commas?
Well, I'll just.
Anyway, forget about that. I'll go on to the next question, if I may. As I say, I've got a plan here showing this sewage works surrounded by houses and gardens. Isn't that against, what is it, EP1, is it? EP14, I believe it is in the local plan. That is a planning matter, isn't it? Yes, it is EP14.
EPF 1 to 4.
Residential amenities should not be harmed by reason of noise, smell, or other nuisances. and should be sited well away from the curtilage of any residential property. That's exactly what this plan shows not. Isn't it? It is near the property.
I'll just bring Adrian in now for you, councillor Waters.
Yeah.
So I think there's a few things we need to clarify here. While it's referred to as a sewage works and has some sewage treatment facilities on it, we are not talking a large scale sewage treatment works of the kind run by Thames Water. We're talking a fairly small facility serving a few properties. The siting of it is identical as the siting as it was to the phase 1 development, which has already been approved. We have no objections from the environmental protection team relating to it in terms of either contamination, noise or smell.
Sorry. We can't have, the public, sorry.
So I mean, we have no objection from our statutory consultee on it. The relationship to the houses within this development is identical to the relationship with the houses in the previous phase, which was approved by committee, which is a material consideration. This really isn't an issue to the grant of planning permission tonight, in my view, as an officer. There is nothing from the environmental health team indicating there would be an odour issue. There's no issues regarding contamination, and if there were, they would be picked up by the contamination conditions on the site. And the relationship of the sewage works to the houses in this application is identical to the relationship of the sewage works to the application that the houses in the application that the council previously granted, which would be a material consideration. So, I mean, I have to give quite strong advice on this. I can't see any difference between the relationship of the houses here and the ones that were approved in the last application to that site.
I have a quick question on that. Is there anywhere in policy that stipulates the size of a sewage works that would be relevant to that? You know, does it say, you mentioned it's only servicing a few houses and it is an active sewer and it's open as well, so it will emit smells. Is there anywhere in policy that dictates that boundary line just on the scale alone?
No, there wouldn't be specifically. No, it's a fairly rare issue. It's not one we write specific policies for. The policies, the EP policies, are to do with fairly generic considerations of noise and odour, etc., and environmental concerns. We wouldn't go down to the detail of specifying a size of sewage works that was of.
But that's the bit I'm trying to drill down. Is you know, is it policy or is it not? You know, if there isn't a boundary between a smaller sewage works versus a larger sewage works, if it just says sewage works in general, that's the basis that we're working our arguments on here and our debates on. Anyway, it's just. I want clarification on that bit.
Can I come back? I think it's clearly against EP 1.4, isn't it? The policy.
Well, that's the bit I'm trying to establish. Yeah. Is the scale an issue or is it not? You know, so
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there are other things as well about, you know, first of all, the phase 1 was approved in 2023, wasn't it?
Yes.
Was there a reason they didn't go ahead with this other bit before, or why did they leave it? I mean, could it be called piecemeal? Under the Maidenhead Southwest plan, you've got to have a, what do they call it, coordinated comprehensive plan. Yeah. And sticking this, having a sewage works in phase 2 doesn't sound, in a way, does it, very coordinated and you know, comprehensive. You know, if you really want to stretch the policy, which I think we should do, because there's no point in having a local plan without abiding by the principles contained in the local plan. And I think, you know, I say again, anybody here buying one of these houses, run this sewage work, started complaining about smell and so on, you know, would have an action against it. I don't know how the thing would work, but and also there's a business about repairing sewage. Can that be done with is there a road over it still or not? I've lost that bit. There was a road over this sewage works, wasn't there?
I know.
At one stage.
I'm familiar with the area. I mean, there's a pipe that runs over the top of the land, so, but that's,
Yeah, but is there a road still over that sewage work? I thought there was originally. Was that the second
oh, in the
road?
planning.
Sorry?
A road going over it now, you mean?
Well,
And this
is
plan?
there?
Yeah.
I'm asking through you, Chairman, to the officer.
Let me bring in James on that one now.
So is the question, is there a road going over the alleged sewage works?
Yes.
At the moment or proposed?
At the moment.
No,
Is there proposed then?
no.
Okay.
And the purpose behind that is that the operations on that land can continue. Just to go back, if I may, Chair, just back onto the implementation of policies, so EP 1.4.
Yeah.
And just be absolutely clear for members' benefit as to what that does say, what the implementation of that policy requires. So to read it out word for word, it says residential amenity should not be harmed by reason of noise, smell, or other nuisance. Accordingly, care should be taken when citing particular commercial or agricultural proposals such as livestock units, silage storage, or slurry pits, which should be sited well away from the curtilage of residential property. So in terms of that criteria 4 of policy EP1, we're talking about the examples that they've provided. For example, things like livestock units, silage storage, slurry pits. That's not what's on that site from what's been submitted in the comments.
Just one point of clarification, if that's okay for you, Madam Chair?
We're doing clarification points of ground, so has anybody got any more points on the visual categories on this basis? Can I bring in Councillor Reason for that?
Of course.
And come back.
Of course, thank you.
People asking the same questions.
So it's just about the sewage works. So just want some clarification because Adrian, you did make quite a point. You mentioned that why is this coming up as an issue when phase 1, it was not raised as an issue against that. And we've, as a planning committee, have granted planning approval for phase 1. And I take your point, all the houses and the gardens are located just as close to that sewage works as the other phase 2 properties would be. So my question is, I was trying to kind of go back and look historically at the application that we viewed previously. I don't recall any mention of a sewage works or that property even being brought into the conversation or even being referred to under phase 1. So just to be clear, we did not give approval on the basis of knowledge of there being the sewage works within that. So I just want to be really clear, you're making a statement that we have approved it previously whilst taking into account that the sewage works was there. I don't understand why it wasn't therefore highlighted to us on the previous application and is being brought into this application. Obviously, I can see because it's now surrounded and you had to mention it because of the access issue. And prior to that, phase 1 did not cause an access issue to actually the sewage works because the pipeline didn't run under phase 1. There was no potential blocking of access to, of repairs and etc. to manage the sewage works. So now I can see why on phase 2, it's quite important that you highlight that to us. But to say that we approved phase 1 whilst consideration for that being that close to the sewage works, I think maybe we need to look back at that and address that point, please, because that wasn't part or mentioned in phase 1. Thank you.
100%. I don't remember it being on that initial document at all.
If I can come in to clarify, I don't think I did say that. I think what I said was the houses are there, they are approved, the relationship is identical, and that's a material consideration. I didn't, if you think I did, I didn't intend to imply that members were fully aware of it and considered it. What I was saying was the relationship is identical, and that identical relationship is a material consideration.
And there was an improvement as well. So, but I think But I needed to make that very clear that that was not brought up under the phase one consideration. So
Yeah, it
that's
wasn't-
why we're having the discussion now, Adrian, because it wasn't discussed under
It wasn't
phase
a
one.
material
So
consideration.
that's why we're giving it a material consideration now. So yeah, if you can, I just wanted that to be appreciated whilst we think through this.
Yeah, thank you, councillor Reeves. Can I bring you in, councillor Singh, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Point of clarification. These sewage works will be surrounded by gardens. So how will access to the sewage works be available when repairs or service or the septic tanks need to be emptied? Be available because they're going to be surrounded by houses and the gardens. And lo and behold, if something worse happens, they collapse. How is there going to be any access to that? As other colleagues, Councillor Reeves and Councillor Walters said, we weren't aware of the information that we have now that we approved a couple of years ago, and that should have been there, and it's materially relevant.
Thank you. Do you want to come in, James?
Yeah, this is why I showed this slide in my earlier presentation and highlighted the pink hatching area, because the pink hatching area denotes the easement strip there, which would provide access for the maintenance of that land. You then got a further pink hatching down to the south of that land as well, which would provide unfettered access. It means the applicants can't.
Sorry, it's just a bit, sorry. Thank you. Carry on,
Continue.
James, yeah.
I'm just losing my train, sorry. So just going back to my point for Councillor Singh's benefit. So the pink line there on the screen down that boundary where the properties abut, that's an easement strip which provides access for the adjacent landowners to service that boundary. And then you've then got the pink hatched lands there to the bottom as well, which would mean that the applicants can't build anything or any structures that would stop access for that, for maintaining that. And then you've also got a further access point there to the north. So it's not like this has been a landlocked. I do need to respond to the query. Is that okay?
Sorry, can we just, yeah, it's not a public debate, if that's okay. Can you let James carry on this? Thank you.
So the access to that land is safeguarded through the legal agreement, and that's set into the 106. So that would be required. So that's how the maintenance of that land would be preserved.
Okay, because according to the map and the photographs that we've been supplied, that's those sewage works are completely surrounded by the gardens and homes, but there isn't access.
Is that access vehicle width, the easement access? That would be my question along.
Or is it pedestrian access?
So the access on the western boundary, the long stretch, is a 1 metre easement, so you wouldn't get a vehicle down there. But the access to the south to the north would allow a vehicle to get there.
So what width of the road is that?
I don't have that answer, but I can see from the plan it's.
I do, because I know that RBWM gave the survey to a third party, and they do not confirm that the road is of sufficient strength to allow emergency vehicles and others to go through there, all of the width. And the width has to be by law, minimum 3.8 metres up to 5.2 metres, and that's only 3.1 metres. Kimbers Lane is a lane, it's not a road. I've been there several times, I've seen it as a council, other councillors have, and so on.
So to clarify, you're talking about general access, or you're talking about access to the sewage?
Yeah, just the general
Farm
access, but
itself.
the sewage access, if it's just pedestrian, where they're saying the vehicle can go there, I don't see how a vehicle is going to be able to get there from the north or south, as the officers is saying. So we need clarification on that.
Yeah, you can see from the plan that the the land safeguarding on pink, I haven't got it on my screen for the moment, but the land safeguarding in the pink hatching that I just previously showed you, that is the width of 2 houses. So I'd be very surprised if a single vehicle couldn't navigate that strip. The point about the emergency access going through the site, I think we did discuss this earlier, but again, that I don't know what evidence you've seen. I don't know what evidence, because I can only comment on what I've seen and what's in the public domain, and I'm sure you understand that position. But I have seen the comments from the local highways authority that confirm that it meets with the standards. So that's what I've got to go on. That's the evidence we've got to make our decision. I can't comment on stuff I haven't seen, as I'm sure you appreciate.
Thank you, James.
Sorry, James, I'm going to put something else on you here, because I'm getting quite concerned that there's a significant misunderstanding about how the access and the roads for the proposal work and what comes down Kimbers Lane and what doesn't. So I'm just wondering, I don't want members making a decision without properly understanding what the vehicular access route is and what is only a emergency access compared to the primary access routes. I'm just wondering if you can bring up a slide in the presentation and show members where the main access route is. Yes. Because I'm a bit worried people aren't quite understanding where the routes are for vehicles.
Councillor Waters, did you want to add something?
I hope we're trying to make absolutely clear that this land is not landlocked. That's what the officer has just said, and he's going to prove that. I mean, there are presumably there are easements or something under the land for the for the drainage and that to go to the houses. Can they be repaired? And is there any inhibition on that? Or, in other words, is it landlocked? Because there's been mention of section, what is it, Article 124 in the MPPF.
They've got the slide up now. Should
Right,
let them
okay.
explain? Yeah.
So I think we've got 2 concurrent conversations going on here. So let's just tick one off, because I'm a simple man. I can only do one thing at one time. So if you look on the screen here, and you follow my cursor. So the application site access comes off of Harvest Hill Road on the phase 1 scheme. It comes down south to this junction on phase 1, and then comes into the phase 2 site here, along this road here. So in the event of I don't want to bring the tone down tonight, but in the event of an accident on phase 2, let's call it a fire, the fire engine is going to come through this site down there, across that road and into the site. Now, in the unlikely eventuality that there's an ambulance treating another house that's blocked the road, for example, then there's the alternative option to come along Kimbers Lane and then come into the roads to the north. But again, we're looking at a very, very, very highly nuanced set of scenarios. And we're talking a very, very bad day at this point, where all the roads are blocked. We've got all the emergency services out. And in our experience, I've worked for the emergency services myself in former jobs. You move a car when you need to get to someone in danger. Firemen are rather robust chaps. They can lift a car and move it out the way. They will do that. That is the reality of it. It's not the go-to and it's not an acceptable solution, but we've got a policy compliant primary emergency access through the site. We've then got a backup access along Kimbers Lane. And the scenario where that was likely to happen is second to none, really. It's minimal, but there are solutions there in those scenarios. And what was the second question was about? Was it about landlocking the sewage works?
To just show us and indicate that that sewage farm won't be landlocked by this development. Anything, repairs they want to do to the sewage farm or whatever it is.
When you say landlocked, do you mean landlocked in terms of it's surrounded by development or doesn't have access to the land?
They don't have access to the land which they otherwise would have if the development wasn't there.
Yeah. So this is exactly why we've written into the legal agreement these pink hatching areas. So here to the north, which is the vehicular parking space width, and then this area down here to the south as well. And there's also rights to come into the site there through the phase 1. So there's 3 access points provided where they can gain access to the site. So yes, it would be surrounded by development, but that's why we've gone over and above to ensure that there is access there. So this landlocked scenario wouldn't arise. I mean, to be perfectly frank, you wouldn't normally do this in the planning system, but we've heard the concerns raised by the local parties. It's completely normal. We understand that. We take that on board, and that's why this is the practical solution to resolving this issue. But access to land, normally speaking, wouldn't be a planning consideration. But we've gone over and above. We've negotiated with the applicants to secure this.
Sorry, sorry, we can't have interruptions. I'm sorry.
So I'm just going to ask, has it been agreed with the owner of the sewage farm, these accesses?
So if I just come in, Leo, so firstly, I mean, I need to reiterate, access to land is a private matter, and access for easements and maintenance of sewage works, etc., is all private matters that aren't a planning consideration. So they'd normally be dealt with without the planning system and wouldn't be a consideration for us tonight. But in this case, the applicant has recognised the issue. They've provided the details that are shown on the plan of how access will be provided for maintenance, etc., of this site, and that will be secured in the legal agreement. So it is secured.
It is what? I didn't hear.
It is secured. The access arrangements that are shown on this drawing with the easement and the 2 access points will be secured by the legal agreement.
Thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Reeves, please?
Yeah, I was just trying to, I was going to ask a question about where, obviously they mentioned this S106, because obviously we're putting a lot on this, and we need to, in my opinion, I know it's not a planning matter, but in consideration of the whole, you know, I have to think about these things. You know, if we were to block in a, you know, something that is in operation, is, you know, has to be commercially viable, and also the repairs. So though essentially, I know what you're saying, it's not consideration that we normally have in planning, it's something that obviously we have to think about. And I was just trying to find where it actually mentions that we are securing it under the S106. And literally I just found it just before you came to me. So I know it's under the section, condition 10.288, about the, based upon the submitted layout and the measures set out in the S106 to safeguard access. So it does actually state that within that. So that's what I was going to ask. And I noticed in the plan where the lower hashed, you know, we're talking about this pink area here. It looked like on the plan it was grass area, or it wasn't actually a road. Is that correct? That it would be, they'd have to like maintain that, and who's going to maintain it? Because it appears to be on the land of the applicant rather than the land of the sewage works. So the maintenance of that to make sure that the access is maintained, because obviously you could just let it grow and then they won't be able to get in. Is that also included under the S106 as well, about the maintenance of a clear access to that area? So I just wanted confirmation on that, if you could.
Yeah, so the standard wording that goes into, because this does come up on a number of sites basically. So the standard wording that goes into 106 is basically the applicants have to maintain unfettered access and not erect any structures, planting, boundary treatments, etc., etc. So, and what we normally do, and it's all subject to the landscaping condition, but you'd normally find like a grasscrete area, it's like a matting that goes down where grass can grow up, so it looks nice. But you can take the weight of a vehicle on there, so you can get a vehicle into the site or park it there, for example. And that's how you normally do it. It's a very, very common treatment to how you do this when you do like things like substation accesses that you've got to get access to. So it's exactly the same principle. We need access to some form of infrastructure, and that's basically the form it would take. But yeah, it's all in the section 106 agreement. Yeah, correct. So the one, yeah. So the 106 deals with the fact that it keeps it free and unfettered access. Then the landscaping condition deals with what it will look like basically. But you obviously can't conflict between the landscaping condition and the Section 106 agreement. That's a very, very robust way of dealing with that kind of issue.
Councillor Singh, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having heard fellow councillors, speakers and the officers, I'd like to propose a motion to refuse this application. And if I can have a few minutes, I'd like to state the reasons why. This application of 24/02786 concerning development on the land of south of Kimbers Lane. After careful consideration of all the proposal, the submitted documentation and concerns raised by our community, I recommend refusal of this application. My recommendation centres on 3 key areas, each of which represents significant and unacceptable impacts. Firstly, the proposed development impact on local infrastructure is serious concern, such as doctors, surgeries, dentists, hospitals, schools, etc. Kimbers Lane and the surrounding road network are already under considerable strain. The addition of traffic generated by this development and the outline transport assessment, which I find and others to be insufficient in its scope and optimistic in its projections, would exacerbate the existing congestion, compromise road safety and negatively affect daily lives of residents. We have heard significant concerns from local residents regarding the capacity of the existing junctions and the suitability of local roads for increased heavy vehicle traffic during construction and the phase beyond. Secondly, the application fails to adequately address the ecological significance of the site. The submitted ecological survey, in my and others' assessment, do not fully capture the biodiversity present. We have evidence of, to mention a specific ecological concern, if known, for example, protected species, important habitat on or adjacent to the site, and proposed development offers insufficient mitigation or compensatory measures to ensure no net loss of biodiversity, as is our duty to uphold. The potential for habitat fragmentation and disruption of local wildlife corridors are simply too great to ignore. And finally, the proposed scale and nature of the development are incompatible with the character of the surrounding area. Kimbers Lane and its surroundings are predominantly rural and low-density residential. This development, with its specific aspect of the scale of flats being 3 stories, perhaps higher, would be incompatible with the density, height, and the layout, and represents an overdevelopment of the site and would fundamentally alter the visual amenity and established character of that residence value. The proposal lacks sufficient integration with surroundings and fails to respect the existing landscape. In conclusion, while we recognise the need for housing, this particular application in this location presents unacceptable risks to our local infrastructure, our natural environment, and the character for our community. For these compelling reasons, I urge the committee to refuse this application 24/02786. This decision is not lightly taken, but I believe it is necessary to protect the long-term interests and well-being of our residents and the unique character of this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Can I go to Councillor Douglas, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you very much. So I've read the report carefully, and we haven't, as a committee, talked much about the benefits, but I've noted them in the report. There's a significant number, and I do think it's worth sort of spending a little bit of time thinking about them. So there's obviously the housing supply side, the housing mix, getting less 1-bedroom flats, more 2-, 3-bedroom flats. That's a good thing. It should be acknowledged. We've got the affordable housing ticked off. The amenity space is good. There's the custom build area. We've got 10% BNG. There's an infrastructure contribution which is substantial. The open space provision is pretty decent, isn't it? And of course, there's the harms identified as well. I mean, I have to say I'm somewhat reassured by officer comments regarding the size and impact of the small sewage farm, whilst being very sympathetic to the plight of the owner of that land being, I don't know what I'd feel like being hemmed in on all sides like that on a personal level, but from a planning perspective, I am somewhat reassured. There's clearly some harm there, but for me, not enough to outweigh the benefits on its own. There's a housing mix issue in the terms of a lack of 4-bedroom houses, dwellings. Again, I think the report says that's demonstrable, but again, for me, that's not significant enough to overcome the tilted balance from the government's national policy, which we have to respect. There's a minor harm in that lack of self-build plots. Again, not enough to, but the thing that really concerns me about this development is the design and appearance. And I agree to the extent that my colleague Councillor Singh, talked about the visual amenity, that there is I would say, I mean, using the words of our policy, there's a bland feel to this development, which could be anywhere in the United Kingdom, and that it undermines rather than reinforces a sense of local identity and space. I understand this is a very subjective issue, of course, but my personal feelings are that I'm inclined to broadly agree with the consultee comments. The parish council call it stark and unappealing. They're referring particularly to the flats, of course, and the civic society call it bleak and overbearing. I mean, that's quite strong, but I have to say, I'm still not certain just on that basis whether this is enough on its own. But the problem for me with the information we have in the report is this issue with the trees, not knowing the categorisation with certainty. So the tree office has been approached for further comment. The tree office has raised an objection. That the question is, are we accurately categorising these trees or are we not? We don't know at the moment. And on its own, maybe that wouldn't be enough to go on with the other, but because I think this is actually more finely balanced, particularly on the subjective issue of the design appearance, I think the one thing that would leave me, the one thing I need to know now is whether these trees are high quality or not, and we don't currently have that information. So, I mean, on that basis, I'm not, with respect to my colleague Councillor Singh, I'm not convinced this is a bad development, but I'm also not convinced it is conformant, that it's that it doesn't sort of fall foul of being demonstrably insignificant, outweighing the benefit. So I'm going to propose a different proposal, that we defer this and bring it back to committee once that tree report is there, once we have that final bit of information, because for me, that's the final piece of the jigsaw, which will enable me to make a determination or to vote for a determination. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. Can I go to Councillor Reeves next, please?
Yeah. Sorry. I just want to get some clarification from legal on this. Not very comfortable. I know we've just had a motion read out by Councillor Singh. I did glance up at the screen as that motion was being read out. It was quite a detailed statement that was read out, and it was off Councillor Singh's phone. Now, I believe there may be evidence there of predetermination because I'd cited it on the screen. I know we've got Katrina here, legal, just to, so we've got the integrity of the committee. I just want to get clarification on that speech, whether that's pre-written before the meeting had begun, or was that something that was typed up during the meeting? I think we just need to get clarification on that.
That's part of my specific statement at the beginning. If he was listening, I listened to all the councillors and the representatives and the officers, read all the reports, and I made an effective essay. So it would, rather than just have bullet points. That's what it was.
Okay, just for the record, was that written up after the meeting had begun or before the meeting had started?
After the meeting had started. I was writing this up.
Could I just have legal, just do some clarification and whether you can be cited on that, please? Just so we're covered, if this application does go to appeal, it's quite a serious application, large scale, and it will no doubt go to appeal. I just want to make sure that the integrity of the decision is upheld. Thank you.
Decision after hearing and moving in. I did not come here. It's previous government or previous person, and I think you should be fact that because I did not. Otherwise, I would have said
Councillor
so.
Singh, can I just bring in Adrian quickly on that point, please?
So, thank you, Chair. I think I just want to be clear. I don't want to get into a debate about issues which would be member conduct issues to do with particularly high bars, which aren't what the committee are here to deal with tonight. And indeed, those things need lots of evidence and things. So I don't want this meeting to go into that realm. I think there were a number of things in the motion read out that Councillor Singh had that I was concerned about from a planning perspective, and the need to have regard to it, for example, the development plan, previous decisions, etc. If it looks like the debate goes towards anyone wishing to second the motion, or it looks like I will come in and give advice on the planning issues and the risks, but I'm just wary I want the meeting to stick to discussing planning issues and not divert into other things, if that's okay.
Councillor Brar, please. Sorry.
Waiting and then. No, it's fine. Yeah, if you don't mind, because I was just waiting patiently for that to happen. No, that's okay. It's not a problem. There was just a couple of things. So moving on, obviously we've talked about the sewage element, and I think I actually share some of the thoughts of my fellow councillor, Councillor Douglas, around that. But I think I wanted to move on, and he mentioned the trees and also the mix, and they were the two things I wanted to just ask about briefly, if I could, just for my own thought process. I also share the sentiment about the actual mix and the actual reduction of the one-bedroom apartments. I think we have far too many of the smaller apartments, and actually we don't need any more. We're done with that, and I appreciate that that's been taken into consideration, and that actually the SBD for 3-bedroom is 25%, and we're getting 46% within this actual on the open market side of it, and also for the 2 beds as well. And I think that shows a progression as well. And when I see that, what I really genuinely need to also see is that there is sufficient open space, because nobody wants to be just stuck in a 3-bedroom apartment, because 3-bedroom apartments are going to be occupied in general by families, and they really need to be able to go out and appreciate access to the open spaces and green fields. Now, I know that they can do that by going on Kimbers Lane and going across the 405, and then there's a beautiful Ockwells Park, and I would of course promote that because it's in Cox Green, and it's one of the prides of Cox Green is access to that. And there is the southern open space. What I would have genuinely liked to have seen in this is that it wasn't just all put down at the bottom, that actually the housing would have been broken up a little bit more with some convenient open spaces closer to the apartments and more within that area. And I think potentially we could have shifted some of the houses from the sewage works down south, where that open space has now all been put as a corridor. But on top of that, I then counter that by saying actually it's nice to have a big open space, because then you have wildlife and you can try and give them more access. If you had it bit by bit, they're not going to be able to walk down a path like we are and then get to the other open space. So sort of countered my own point there. But I do think that the mix is really good. What I would have preferred, and I really want to make this point here, is that when you're presenting to us an open market mix of that, to just summarize that it's within policy on the affordable housing, to me, is not enough. And I've raised this on a previous meeting about other things where you are like, it's just like one statement, almost a sentence, and to give us the respect to actually give us the figures and actually be open, because not only is that for us, it's transparent to everybody that views this consideration and this discussion, is that I would like to have seen the actual SPD and the actual percentage split on the affordable housing between 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, because it's not just the open market people that need 3-bedroom places and 2, it's actually the affordable housing. That's where the real issue lies. It's families that cannot get on the property ladder and cannot get into affordable housing that is suitably big enough for them to be able to progress through through that. And so to me, that's really an important thing to see when we look at this in the report, is that we see the actual percentage of affordable housing split, and that isn't in here. I've seen it on other applications. I don't know why we didn't have it on this one. And you're probably going to display it now, I bet, for me, which is why I'm asking the question. And then also with the trees, it's great to see the 9:1 ratio, and we see this lovely streetscapes of trees and along the road. What I would like to understand is, what are those trees? Is there a way of knowing what they're going to be? Are we planting certain trees, or are they just going to be a spindly little tree in the middle of a path that is literally going to die off in about 5 years' time? That to me is not a quality tree being planted. So I think what we need to understand more is when they're replanting, and the replanting ratio is, what quality of tree are they planting? Are they planting a new oak tree? Are they planting, something that will grow into over a long period of time, a category B or, A or B tree? And I think that's missing. But you'll probably put up another graphic that will say, actually, we have that figure. But that's my thing, is we should really know that, because it's important to me. And I think also Councillor Douglas has also expressed the importance of not just saying, oh, we're going to replace it with lots of trees, if they're just going to die off within a few years. That's not a sustainable future for our developments around ecology and supporting that. So I'll just stop, and I'll take this in, if I may, briefly. But that's what I wanted to inquire about.
Thank you, Councillor.
So it's actually in the report under 10.54, and I can look it up myself.
Can I go to Councillor Braun next, please?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I'll go and digest that myself.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm going to second Councillor Douglas' motion.
Sorry, I didn't get.
I'm going to second Councillor Douglas's motion.
Okay. Councillor Singh, please.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Chair. Tell you where I am at. There was a clarification I wanted. Where was it?
Councillor Singh, if you're trying to find something, I've actually jumped the queue with you with Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, go on.
Are you happy for me to go to Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, you can. I
Yeah.
found it, but.
Thank you. It's my fault. Sorry.
You're coming to me. Sorry, I've got confused on who's speaking next.
Sorry, Councillor Taylor. I jumped the queue there with Councillor Singh, but he's agreed for you to go first. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm echoing all the concerns about the sewage works. It concerns me that in phase 1 we weren't aware of these sewage works, and had we been aware, we would have had conversations about this at that time. So I'm disappointed in the phrasing that, or in phase 2 the houses are in exactly the same position, because we would have had that conversation in phase 1. But that's kind of a bit by and by at the moment. I'm still quite, I don't know how I feel about that. I'm going to start with the bad points. There's been major issues on the Taylor Wimpey site phase 1 with the condition of Harvest Hill, with vehicles going in and out of the site, and really not good maintenance at the site, and pretty poor communication from the developer. So I would urge that the developer take that into account, and if this planning permission is granted, that they take a bit more care on site. I've had residents that have had to do major detours to go to their homes because they don't want to use Harvest Hill because the mud all over the road is causing issues. It's dangerous. There's lorries parked up in all sorts of conditions and ways, you know, waiting to get into the site. So I would ask that the developer takes a bit more care and, you know, sorts the site out a bit better. I'm not keen on the flats along the A404 being used to mitigate sound. It makes sense from a design point of view, but it does concern me that the residents or the occupiers of those flats might have issues unless, you know, additional things like triple glazing are used in the construction. But there are good points to this development. It leads well, phase 2 leads well into phase 1. There are green routes that are going through both the phases and into the Berkeley development to the north and into the golf course over the road. There's a lot of open space within both the phases. Granted, it is to the south of the site, but I know they did have plans for like wilding and orchards. So I'm quite pleased with the amount of open space that is available on the site. It's good to see 3-bed apartments. I completely get where that's coming from with downsizing, and it makes sense to have more 3-beds. It's nice to see the wide streets within the development. They look like, because they've put the parking and they've done a wider street scene, and they're looking to landscape with trees, it does make the streets look more appealing and it makes it more open. I would ask that the developer consider, when they're planting things like bushes and trees, to use as mature specimens they can, so that we're not planting saplings that take years and years to grow. It would be nice to get, you know, the biggest kind of specimens in there that we can, so that it's as appealing as it can be when residents move in. But there are concerns. I still have concerns with this application. It just seems, it doesn't seem to sit well. There seems to be some issues and some loose ends, and I do wish that things had been tied up and maybe explained a bit better. But yeah, that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Can I go to you now, Councillor Singh?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to just get one clarification, first of all. 10.206 regarding the travel plan, is that a typo in there? It says the framework travel plan has been submitted in support of the application, which has been assessed by the local highways authority, which does not demonstrate any reason as to why a suitable travelling plan could be achieved within the subsequent corresponding S106 agreement.
Did you want to go, James?
That's not a typo. No, that's I think your question is, so what the developers do is they submit a framework travel plan showing what could be achieved.
Yeah.
And then we normally then secure a travel plan, the final travel plan, to which would then be secured basically as part of the legal agreements. They demonstrate what can be achieved, firstly, and then you finalise it and secure it through the Section 106 agreement.
Okay, so there's no travel plan that can be secured. Is that
So there will be one secured, yeah, in the Section 106.
There will be?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Councillor Reeves, please.
Okay. Time for affordable housing conversation, I think. Okay, I've looked at the figures with keen interest. Now I think we set the scene obviously under paragraph 7.7.4 of the Borough Local Plan emphasises that affordability is a major concern to those on the lowest earnings who are generally first-time buyers. But the borough's affordability ratio is that actually based on earnings, it's 12.02 times the average salary is the cost of housing. So due to that high price of housing, many people on the lower paid and lower skilled jobs are filled by people who cannot afford to live in the borough, and that's shocking that they shouldn't be able to live nearby, and then has led to increased commuting. And we all know what increased commuting can do as well. It's pollution and it's attacking the environment, which is something that we should really be treasuring. So it is a very key thing that we need to address that problem. So when I looked at the figures, and I think we've commented about how great it was with the open market division, and that we looked at 46% were 3 beds and 40% were 2 beds against the SPD, and we were doing really well. I thought that was great, amazing. And this is why I asked about the affordable housing mix, because then when I look at the affordable housing mix, I'm afraid it goes a little bit downhill for me at that point. Because what you haven't secured is what is essential, and that is houses. We only have here, so we have 2-bed flats, 46%, SPD's 20%. Great. 1-bed flats for the affordable housing. Now, if I look back to the open market, 1-bed housing, wow, that was really low percentage, but they've hyped it up on the affordable housing, thinking that actually we need to provide lots of affordable housing in 1-bedroom formats. That's not really the issue. The issue is that people, families, and not 1-bedroom flats, which are individuals or like maybe just an early partnership, need to get into affordable housing. It's actually more the other way. And so we have a 24% 1-bed flats against 15% SPD mix. 2-bed houses, 0% against a 25% SPD. 3-bed flats, 12% against 0%, which is kind of like, obviously that's good because we're providing the 3-bedroom flat option. Although if obviously I looked at what we had for the open market, and that was 46% against 25%. And then 3-bed houses on the affordable market is only 15% against an SPD total mix of 30%. That's half the amount that's being proposed of affordable houses of what we expect and what we know we need. And that's why we have an SPD. We set out what this borough needs in our planning policies and documentation. This development is only delivering half of that, 15% against the 30% requirement on the 3-bed houses. So I think, okay, it's great that we looked at this and said, we're going to have these 3-bed houses, open market, there's a high percentage of them. That's great. But what we've then done is then completely skewed it on the affordable housing, and we've lost where we need the affordable housing. 3-bedroom houses and no 2-bedroom houses. So I think the mix hasn't really achieved what I thought it should do from an affordable housing perspective. I know that was a lot, and I've kind of tried to do it holistically and a view across all of that. Just want to understand why in your pre-discussion with the developer that wasn't picked up and we didn't put more weight around that, because it clearly is one of our key things that we have to deliver against the borough local plan is the right mix of affordable housing, and that's what that SPD has been established to achieve. So to me, that has quite a significant weighting around that design of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Did you want to come in, James?
There's a couple of points to just extrapolate here to give you a bit of context and understanding around this. So the starting point is the SPD requirement, and an SPD is always, it doesn't override policy. It helps you understand policy, it helps you implement policy, but it's not as absolute as policies. That's kind of where an SPD sits. So we'll always look at an SPD to try and help us along the way and corroborate things and calibrate things, but it will never necessarily override things, override a policy. But part of the reason why the numbers look skewed, which I think is kind of what you're alluding to, is why we've got so many 1s and 2s, is because of the flats on the site. And obviously we've got flats because of the site-specific issues in terms of the A404M. Some of those units have to go to affordable housing because you've got to get that spread of mix. Then what happens, an RSL, so registered social landlord, generally will not take on mixed tenure units, because what you end up getting is you get conflicts between tenures. So for example, typically affordable housing tenures wouldn't necessarily pay the service charges, pay towards all the communal facilities, and you get tensions within the blocks. So the outcome of that from the RSLs is they want singular blocks of housing. And there is a bit of a benefit to that, to the borough, because it means that once you've built a block of flats, you get a whole block of flats full of affordable housing, which is not a bad thing. But that's why the numbers start to skew, if that makes sense, towards those figures, really. But the other thing, just to add in, is a bit of context, is the affordable housing numbers were looked at pre-application stage, and we had the council's housing officer look at those numbers at that stage too. So the design evolution of that process is always done with the affordable housing officer. And the advice that we got from him, obviously he is much closer to the housing register than I am. So that's his specific role. And he was quite content with the mix of units. It did push towards more housing, to be honest with you, it did. It was earlier, it was less in the process, but we did evolve that process from there. And it got to a point where the affordable housing officer was content with the mixes put forward. And he'd normally only be content if it's going to meet a need on the register. So yes, completely understand the point that, you know, when you look at it against the SPD from a numerical side of things, the conclusions are the conclusions, like you've rightly pointed out. But obviously there is a bit of a rationale behind as to why we are at that stage, and it's the harm that you would give to that. If we want to talk about harms now, we would put at the limited end, because the affordable housing officer is saying this is actually meeting a need, and that's what we're trying to do here as well. So.
Thank you. We do actually have one motion on the table already, and I think that was something, Adrian, that you wanted to talk about, which is to defer, which was proposed by Councillor Douglas and seconded by Councillor Bra. Did you want to jump in before I go to anybody else?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I think I just need to come in, or I think it would be helpful to come in here, because there's a couple of things that we've got to bear in mind. One is the MPPF requires us to proactively deal with applications and to deal with them as promptly as possible and not introduce unnecessary delay. The second is, in dealing with any decision, we have to deal with the tilted balance, as James mentioned earlier. We should be approving unless any adverse harms. I'm not even going to try and remember the precise words, but James covered it earlier. Now, in terms of the tree deferral that was put forward earlier, effectively what we have before us is we have an arboricultural assessment from a qualified arboriculturalist that the applicant submitted. In it, there are 5 tree numbers which are classified as U and scheduled for removal. One of those numbers is actually 2 trees, which is why the total is 6. But all of those are classified as U and for removal because they have some form of disease and aren't suitable for long-term retention. So out of those 6 trees, one of them has a disease that I can't pronounce because I'm not an arboriculturalist and I won't try to, and the rest have ash dieback. If I'm honest, the reason the tree officer hasn't spent resource going out on site and looking at them for herself is because it doesn't make a difference to the view she would reach. They're categorised as U. The authority wouldn't be seeking to retain them or try and retain them unless they were categorised as B or above. So we're 2 grades below where you would have to be to even consider retaining them. And even if there was an error in the categorisation, the loss of 6 trees is going to be nowhere near the level of scale or harm that could possibly warrant the refusal of an allocated site in the tilted balance. So the reason that the tree officer hasn't gone back to look at them, to be honest, is it shouldn't impact, it can't impact on the planning judgment we have to make tonight. And the tree officer hasn't considered that it would be a good use of officer time to do that, because we have an arboricultural assessment by a qualified arboriculturalist. it says that these trees have disease. Even if they don't have disease, it shouldn't and wouldn't be enough to tilt the planning balance towards anything other than approval on that ground. So I think I just really do need to provide quite clear advice on that. We should be looking to approve this application, and we shouldn't be deferring unless we think the deferral would make a difference to the decision that members would make. And I really can't see how that would. But obviously it's a decision for the members tonight.
Thank you, Adrian. Councillor Gursing, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I just wanted to just talk a little bit about the design and what my thoughts are. I'm concerned about the sewage, which is sort of outside the red line, but also if you look towards the A404, the site adjacent to this development is a waste recycling plant. There's a considerable amount of machinery, noise. I understand there's a concrete crushing operation on site. Ideally, I would have liked to see some sort of palisade fencing, some sort of sound barrier protection for the residents. And I understand the thought process about putting these big blocks of flats there to protect residents in the adjacent properties, which on the face of it makes sense, but the people living in them apartments, the quality of life for them, especially living at height with no protection from themselves, not from the road and noise within their properties, but also from the dust and noise from this recycling plant, which is very, very close proximity. That design, it doesn't really feel right to me. And I know the SPD talks about, having the apartment block sort of closer to the town centre. But when I was looking at this sort of, the distance from where these blocks of flats are to, for example, the town centre, it's a 2 mile walk. If you go into town or drive. I just don't feel that is a very, very good design. The way that's been put together, just for future occupiers, from that perspective alone. But yeah, anyway, it probably doesn't make a difference because obviously you've got 2 motions on the table, but I just wanted to put that out there for the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. We do have 2 motions on the table, but we've only got one with a seconder. And that's Councillor Douglas, and super quick.
Sorry, I forgot to ask, and it was something that I'd written down previously. On the north exit, where I know that we're encouraging active travel, and there's the pedestrian exit from the site onto Kimbers Lane. It looks like there's like a triangular area where the roads sort of dissipate and they go round. I think like an island almost there, and it's within the area of the red line, that part of Kimbers Lane. So the implication to me is that is owned by Taylor Wimpey, that part of Kimbers Lane, because it's on the site, within the site line, the red line. I don't know if you want to bring it up on the screen, but I'm looking at it here. If that is the case, is there any mention or protection about preventing any form of parking there? Because Kimbers Lane is literally, there's nothing there to prevent people from. And I'm just concerned, if people can't get into the site, they'll just park along Kimbers Lane there and then just walk in to the site. And then we'll get an issue of safety of people coming out there, or, of blocking Kimbers Lane. So I was just wondering why the red line goes out and across and takes into some of the... Can you see what I mean? Am I missing something there, or can you explain on the map for me what's happening? Yeah, please. So it's just really quick. something I just want to get clarification on before we make a decision. Yeah, it's that white. Can you see it goes out onto there? Yeah. Yeah, all of that there, it's captured within the red line of the site. I just wanted to, if you could explain what that means.
This would be the most boring answer I'll ever give you in all of the committee processes, but it's quite a important one to understand. So most developers, what they will do, they won't take the red line up to the site boundary. They'll go slightly beyond it, basically. So when they need to do works to come out onto that road,
right,
then it's included within that.
Okay.
That's not within their own ownership. I think that's within Highways ownership off the top of my head.
So.
But they simply serve the notice on that. But you'll normally find, it's quite common, they'll extend that red line out onto the access just so that everything's covered.
So the planned works is just so that they can do the exit of the pedestrian and cycleway onto there.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so that'll just be a highways thing that we would be outside planning, obviously, but would be something that we could obviously petition to have some sort of
and it goes
restriction around that area to stop parking and things like that.
Yeah,
but we would deal with that separately.
It goes through the separate 278 section 38 process for the council.
Yeah.
I mean, the one comment I'll make up is quite flippant because it's quite a common, quite an easy way to explain it. But you normally only get overspill parking if your parking ratios on site are wrong. Because people tend to park on the car parking spaces. So, like I said, we're not concerned ourselves as officers on that because it meets with the standards. But again, there's a recourse through the separate process to pick those things up.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, but that's clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Cashmere Singh, very quickly, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This question may be out of purview of the officers, but I just wanted to nail down, is there anything the officers can do or request from the developer as to reasonable service charges for the flats? In my own ward, we have a development such as Bolters Meadow. Properties can't be sold as flats. There used to be £2,000 service charge, and now it's 4,000, resulting in the properties being unsold. Last year.
I think that's outside planning, isn't it? Am I correct?
Yes, that would be outside of planning. So no would be the answer. We can't.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Cashmere. Councillor Douglas, after Adrian's spoken about the points, are you still happy to proceed with your motion?
A short clarification. So, I mean, I do think that for me, this is something that will make the difference in terms of whether I had this information or not. But I'd like to hear from the tree officer. I'd like her comments regarding her queries about the categorisation of the trees, like I said, but also the potential encroachment into the root protection area of the boundary. If we could clarify those two things, we'd request from the tree officer as quickly as possible, so we can bring this back to committee and determine it, without unnecessarily inconveniencing the developer.
Yeah, thank you. In that case, well, good to go to that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so we have the motion on the table proposed by Councillor Douglas, seconded by Councillor Brar, which is to defer the application in respect of to allow the officer to conduct the tree report to bring it back to a further committee. I'll ask councillors if they're for deferral, against deferral, or abstaining from the vote. Councillor Brar.
For.
Councillor Douglas.
For.
Councillor Martin.
For.
Councillor Reeves.
For.
Councillor Cashmere Singh.
For.
Councillor Gertsch Singh.
For.
Councillor Waters.
For.
It's unanimous, Chair, so the motion is passed.
Thank you. Before we go on to the next agenda item, I'm going to suggest a comfort break for everybody. Welcome back, everyone. So now I need to go on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 5, which is the application 24/02717 land at Spencer's Farm. So if I could hand over to Mohammed for the presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is land at Spencer's Farm, Summerleaze Road, Maidenhead. And the application is for reserved matters, which relates to the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. And the outline application was approved, allowed at appeal for up to 330 dwellings and land for a primary school for up to 3 forms of entry with associated landscaping, open space, car parking, drainage associated works. And the means of access only to be considered at the outline stage where all the other matters were reserved. In terms of the updates, we received one additional objection received on the 1st of April. From my understanding, it's an individual that previously objected, and they're reiterating their points, which are highlighted here, which relate to the high density of the site, size of properties and gardens being too small, the overall design of facades not being attractive for a modern estate, concerns regarding the heights of buildings, and there is no demand for 1-bedroom apartments. 2-bedroom units should be reduced in favour of 3- and 4-bedroom properties, and a query on how affordable housing is achieved. The officer response here is that these matters have been addressed in the relevant section of the committee report. Here we have a structure of the presentation in 5 parts, which we'll be going through. Part 1, the overview of the recommendation. So the application site falls within allocated. Oh, sorry. I'll try this. Oh. Plus minus. Yep. There's a little signal there.
Does anyone need Mohammed to go back a couple of slides if you couldn't see properly, or are we okay? Just going forward now. Yeah. Thank you. Carry on, Mohammed.
Yep. Okay. So this is the update slide, and then the structure of the presentation, and then the overview of the recommendation, part 1 of this section of this presentation. So the application site falls within the allocated housing site AL25. As mentioned, the outline application was allowed at appeal, and this application relates to the reserved matters. The local planning authority is unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and therefore the tilted balance applies in this instance as well, where the development should be approved unless the harms arising significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the scheme when taken as a whole. So concerns were raised by the tree officer in respect to the impact on trees within the site, and this has been addressed through additional protection measures and the use of tree protection measure conditions. Third parties have objected regarding highway safety at the new junction of Cookham Road and related to flood risk, loss of trees, amenity impact, design access, and parking arrangements, and this is all addressed within relevant sections of the report. The harms found here are not of a significant and demonstrable nature when taking into account the overall benefits of the scheme. So therefore, it is recommended that planning permission be approved. So in terms of the approved outline, this includes the parameters plan, a design code, and the Section 106 agreement being secured. So just want to highlight to members that conditions 5 and 6 of the outline approval requires a reserved matters application to accord with the principles of the parameters plan and design code, which are outlined in this slide. So the design code covers the following areas: land use, access, streets hierarchy, block typology and heights, density, key frontages, key spaces, including green infrastructure, pedestrian cycle routes, and landmark buildings. The landmark buildings are generally on the corner plots, which are slightly higher. And the parameters plan identifies the building heights with the landmark buildings ranging from 2 to 3 stories, and the southern portion of the site as an area for the primary school, which is to be delivered separately as a separate application at a future date. And an informal open space, access being from Cookham Road and the emergency access from Westmead. So the Section 106 agreement secured 40% affordable housing, along with the tenure mix, which is also outlined in the outline planning permission. Here we have the parameters plan overlaid with the proposed site plan. So this clearly shows how it basically meets the requirements set out in the parameters plan. The site is highly interconnected with adjacent land through pedestrian, cyclist and vehicle connectivity, and priority is given to pedestrian cyclists within the site. So in terms of the proposed development, proposes 330 residential units, including 40% affordable housing with 5% custom build dwellings, which is all secured in the Section 106 at outline stage. And the outline application, which was allowed at appeal, includes the parameters plan design code, as mentioned earlier, and the vehicle access taken through a single new access road from Cookham Road to the southwest of the site, which is right here for, if you can see the cursor. Pedestrian cycle access facilitated to the north of Westmead, and there are a total of 4 pedestrian cycle access points. Open space B&G land found to the southeast of the site. Here are a few photographs of the site. So views looking from the northern side, the wooded area, the woodland area, and the existing view from Cookham Road, which was taken last week. So you can see that where the main access will be created, and views from the north of Lutman Way. So the proposed development, this slide shows the building heights, which shows 2-story buildings along the western boundary of the site in a salmon colour. Pink-coloured buildings comprise 3-story buildings, and the yellow-coloured buildings are 2-story buildings, with the brown-coloured buildings being single-story garages. The heights reflect those outlined in the approved design code, and the heights provide variety in the streetscape. Here we have some CGI images of the development. So we've got a view looking from Cookham Road, the main entrance into the site, and the other image showing the western, the central landscape area, just looking west. So in summary, the development provides 330 dwellings on an allocated housing site within the borough. Mix of building heights range from 2 to 3 stories across houses to apartments. The layout follows the approved parameters plan and design code, and the outline permission allowed at appeal for up to 330 units. So the reserved matters again relate to appearance, layout, scale, which is all in accordance with development policy plans. Specific matters now. So in terms of design materiality, there are 4 key character areas which have been outlined in the approved design code as follows. Key area 1, so that's the entrance gateway from Cookham Road, so that's to the south of the site. Key area B, central square, which is to the centre of the site where the orange section is. And then you've got Park Edge, northeast of the site. And then you've got the northern woodlands to the north of the site, which is key area D. The material palette complies with the approved design code, which is generally brick or sort of weatherboard, sort of colour. And here we have an image of the street scene. This is from the entrance gateway via Cookham Road. In terms of amenity impact, proposed 3-story apartment blocks and 2.5-story house along the southern part of the site are which are close to the site entrance. There is sufficient separation distance created by both the railway line and the landscaping to the south from the nearest properties on the opposite side of Maidenhead Road, and the nearest properties to the south along Ilbury Road, separated by primary school site. By the primary school site creates a distance of it in excess of 30 metres from the proposed buildings, and garages to properties to the southeast corner sufficiently set back from Ilbury Road, which we have a little section of the drawing here showing the distances and separation. So in terms of housing mix, we have 87 apartments and 243 dwellings as part of the 330 total residential units. In the open market housing table, we can see that see the requirements and what's proposed. So of this 198 open market mix, features a greater percentage of 3 and 4 bedroom properties unless 1 and 2 bedroom properties. The focus of this scheme has been to provide dwellings suitable for different occupants, couples, families, retirees, and the 2 and 3 bedroom apartments meet the needs of a wide mix of occupants. The higher 3-bed percentage in the property is driven by our approved outline scheme. So the rationale is that 3-bedroom houses were considered more suitable over 1-bedroom units in this location. Affordable housing mix has been reviewed by the council's housing officer and deemed acceptable, which also meets the tenure mix set out in the Section 106 agreement. So the next slide should show us this. Yep. So yeah, this is the affordable housing mix that's been reviewed by the council's housing officer and meets the tenure mix secured in the Section 106 agreement. So we have a total of 132 units, and 10% would be 4 beds, 31% 3 beds, 24% 2 beds, and 20% 2 beds, and 15% 1 beds. In terms of the accommodation, the layouts of each of the units meet the gross internal areas of each unit meet minimum space standards with adequate internal layouts provided, providing dual aspect, private amenity. In terms of gardens, majority of the gardens for the houses and apartments, which are a total of 269 properties of 3 and 30, would meet or exceed the minimum space standards. The houses which do fall below the required areas, particular units, due to their shape, would not limit the function of the gardens for future occupiers. Custom build, 5% of the open market dwellings are secured as custom build dwellings, which equates to 10 units, outlined in red to the northern side of the site, and it's highlighted on this portion of the drawing. And each of the custom built dwellings has a range of variations. A purchaser can choose from this to suit their needs. The precise details will be finalised via approval of the plot passports under a discharge of the Section 106 agreement. In terms of trees and landscaping, there are trees around the boundary of the site that contribute to the character of the area, which are safeguarded through tree protection measures conditions. And 185 trees are set to be removed, which are category B or lower. 513 trees are proposed to be planted in the landscaping strategy, which also can assist with the biodiversity net gain credentials of the site. And here we have this is a section from the submitted landscaping strategy of the types of trees being proposed. So again, the soft and hard landscaping details within the landscaping strategy have been shown and will be secured via condition. The landscaping strategy submitted would be secured via compliance condition, and areas in front of the apartment blocks provide for opportunities for additional landscaping, and streets are all tree lined, which will be secured via discharge of conditions process. Application is required to maximize the on-site landscape and enhance the BNG values of the site. So here we have a key showing the proposed street tree planting and proposed native tree planting on this drawing. In terms of public open space and play space, the application accords with the local area of play requirements on site and wider open space standards, the neighbourhood equipment area of play, NEEP, sensory garden and open space for recreational use situated to the southeast of the site. 25% of the open public space provided on site as set out in the 106 agreement. Here we have the transport and highway section. So vehicle access is taken from Cookham Road. As mentioned, it's approved as part of the outline application. Non-vehicle movements are provided to the north and south of the site and link it to adjacent roads and green spaces. Hierarchies of streets provided within the site layout accord with the approved design code. Parking requirements exceed the parking standards set out in the council's parking strategy by providing 607 spaces. All properties will be fitted with EV chargers via planning condition. And here are 2 sections, A and B, from within the site and closer to the entrance in terms of what the road layout and planting would look like. In terms of flood risk, this is the site is predominantly located within a flood zone 1 and 2, with the eastern part of the site being within flood zone 3, which is high probability of flooding. In terms of surface water flood risk, it is set out that parts of the site are very low to low, medium and high risk of surface water flooding as you go throughout the site. The sequential test was passed at the outline application stage, and the planning inspector also considered an exceptions test. If a exception test was to be considered, it would be passed. At appeal stage, the inspector stated that the wider sustainability benefits would outweigh the flood risk in this case. And on that basis, the appeal was allowed. This reserve matters application then requires consideration of the specific site-specific flood risk generated by the design of the development. As confirmed within the appeal decision, the proposal would enable works which are part of the full planning application, which raise the height of the land in order for the site area to, for the proposed housing effectively being within flood zone 1. And the LFFA raised no objections to the submitted flood risk assessment. In terms of sustainability, in order to assist in meeting the objectives of the Borough Local Plan Policy SB2, the submission includes a number of initiatives which are outlined here in bullet points. So development is designed and constructed to meet Part L 2021 regulatory standards as a minimum. Fabric first approach is taken. Design of buildings to reduce energy demand through maximizing solar gain, wind sheltering, mitigation, heat islands effects, and low carbon fuel sources, heat pump technology fitted to each property, and solar panels as well. So the development would exceed the minimum requirement of 12% by achieving 80.11%. The development's energy demand provided from renewable or low carbon sources on site, which is in compliance with requirement 1 of the borough's sustainability SPD. And details of type and location of proposed renewable energies use shall be secured by a planning condition. And again, achieving over 80% improvement in CO2 emissions compared to the 2021 building regulations compliance scheme. So in summary, mix of dwellings is considered suitable for the site, location and site constraints. The proposal meets the approved parameters plan and design code requirements as part of the outline scheme, and protection of existing trees is secured through the planning conditions and additional tree planting when an increase is secured within the landscaping strategy. So no policy conflict identified. That is of a significant and demonstrable nature. In terms of infrastructure delivery, we have 40% affordable housing, provision of custom self-build 5%, provision of infrastructure contributions, and 10% biodiversity net gain, provision of open space, delivery of 25% public open space provisional site, and contributions to highway improvements by the infrastructure contribution. So in terms of the conclusion recommendation, we have again, which James outlined in his presentation, benefits and harms for members to see clearly of the scheme. So we've got provision in terms of benefits, we've got provision of purpose-built family housing on allocated housing site, valuable contribution delivery of borough's housing numbers, early delivery of affordable housing, meeting the needs set out on the borough's housing register, provision of custom-built housing, provision of sustainability constructed housing to latest building reg standards, and provision of EV charging points, ability for the site to be built out, delivered relatively quickly, provision of ecology enhancements through the application of BNG of minimum of 10%, creation of employment through the construction of the dwellings, and incidental expenditure with the local economy through the occupation of dwellings, incidental expenditure associated with the house moves of future occupants, provision of additional and enhanced public open spaces, and provision of additional tree planting to enhance biodiversity across the site. The only harm identified is housing mix not absolutely in accordance with the SPD, and the loss of category B and C trees. So in terms of the tilted balance, again, we consider that the proposal, the decision takers would need to be able to clearly demonstrate that the benefits of the development are outweighed by harms that are both significant and demonstrable in nature. And officers have considered the benefits of the proposal development as a whole. When weighing these benefits against the impacts of development, officers conclude that the impacts do not outweigh the benefits. The proposal follows the approved outline scheme, which is a design code, parameters plan, and the Section 16 has secured contributions. Therefore, we recommend that planning permission be granted. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. We've got two speakers on this one. So if I could call up Rob Linnell, first of all. And when you're ready, you've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Chair, councillors, my name is Rob Linnell. I'm the agent for Bellway Homes, the applicant. Bellway acquired this site following the grant of outline planning permission at appeal in May 2024. I must thank your officer, Mohammed Salim, for his hard work on this application. He has pushed for the very best layout, design, and environmental performance possible. The principle for this development is clearly established through both the outline consent and its allocation in the adopted local plan, which removed the site from the Greenbelt. The appeal considered other key matters, including flood risk, traffic generation, highway safety, including emergency access, biodiversity, and the amenity of local residents. It also granted full planning consent for access and earthworks, which Bellway has recently commenced on site. The layout and design of the scheme reflects the plans and design code approved at the outline stage and has been supported by your officer. The outline application attracted a lot of local interest. In contrast, this application has only received 15 comments. The main points raised are all matters that have been addressed in the appeal and are not therefore open to review at this stage. Notwithstanding this, Bellway recognises the disturbance that construction activities can have on the local area. It is a 5-star house builder and considerate contractor and prides itself on keeping the local community updated on activities via newsletters and having a dedicated contact point to ensure any issues are dealt with quickly. In addition, all statutory consultee comments have been addressed. Of note is the enhancement to the environmental performance of the homes, which has been increased from 12% on-site energy for renewables to over 80%, and the exceedance of Part L standards
1 minute remaining.
from 31% to 80.25%, both significantly exceeding the targets in the adopted SPD. The proposal has other significant benefits, including the provision of 330 homes to help the housing land supply, 40% or 132 affordable homes, and Bellway has already secured a registered provider for the site, 10 custom-built homes, extensive and above policy standard of open space, establishment of a car club, planting of significant trees to add to the existing circa 1,000 trees on site already, and land for a new primary school. Thank you for listening, and I respectfully ask you to support this highly sustainable application that accords with policy in line with your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I call up the second speaker, please? Councillor Del Campo.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Catherine Del Campo. I'm a ward member for Firs Platt, which adjoins the site, the application site. For transparency, I'm also a lead member with responsibility for housing, but I'm here in my capacity as a ward member. Ever since Spencer's Farm was first mooted as a possible location for development, the views of neighbouring residents were consistently ignored right up until this panel considered the outline planning application for the site. For the first time ever, residents felt seen and heard. Any relief, though, was short-lived as the inspector overturned the decision and granted outline permission. Crucially, though, he ruled that this panel did not act unreasonably, which shows just how finely balanced the decision was. All your reasons for rejecting the application are as valid now as they were then, perhaps more so as the residents of Westmead have experienced further flooding since the appeal was concluded. I hope you've read the objections to this application and noted the numerous issues with the site, including, but not limited to, building on the floodplain, inadequate parking, lack of infrastructure and tall buildings, including raised houses and apartment blocks. Residents have spent thousands, probably tens of thousands of hours over the last decade or so, poring over documents, attending meetings and writing considered submissions, and they deserve to be heard once more. Of course, I want you to turn down this application, but I recognise the extent to which you are constrained not only by the disastrous local plan we inherited, but also the decision of the appeal inspector last year and the dreaded tilted balance. Therefore, if you are mindful to approve, please may I ask for at least 3 additional conditions to be imposed. The first recognises the concerns of residents, particularly those in Lutman Lane, Westmead and parts of Alderbury Road, about the overbearing nature of the development. Please add a condition to require additional landscaping to provide substantial screening along the boundary of the housing site and the school site. The height to be agreed between the developer and the borough, but enough to provide residents with significantly green views. The second recognises the site's previous status as greenbelt and a haven for wildlife.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. This site could provide a significant contribution to the Maidenhead, Cookham, Swift corridor. Therefore, I'd like to see a condition that requires an ambitious level of Swift bricks, as well as regular bird and bat boxes, the exact number and location to be agreed with the borough. Finally, I welcome the applicant's ambitions around the use of clean energy. However, it is regrettable that plans to install solar panels are not accompanied by the installation of batteries. Please add a condition to require the installation of solar batteries to reduce the estate's reliance on the grid and to add resilience in the event of supply issues. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, councillor. So before we go into debate, does anybody have any questions for clarity to start with on this one? Councillor Walters.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to ask the officer, we keep hearing about the 5-year supply. What actually is it now? Last figure I heard 4.6, I think. Is that right? The 5-year land supply. That's the question I'm asking you.
Who's going? James.
Yeah.
4.47 is the last published
Okay,
figure.
thanks.
Thank you, James. Councillor Reeves, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to get some clarification because I heard Councillor Del Campo mention about the renewable energy side of things, and I picked up on it when it was actually coming up about the 80%. I think it's a great achievement, and I really respect the developers for pushing that, you know, to get us to that. But obviously that 80% isn't 100%, and you know, we have a target in this borough to be able to achieve our use of renewable and increase our use on renewable energy. And I wondered, this mention of the storage batteries, I know that, I mean, it's great to have photovoltaic solar panels, but then obviously you need to, at night, or when there isn't any, you know, it's to be able to then store it and to be able to then reuse it and to effectively have better use of the solar panel technology. I'm just wondering, is that possible under a planning condition for that to be considered? And, you know, I want to get some feedback on that proposal because I'm quite interested in actually that proposal, and I'd like to learn some more about what we can do to try and achieve that.
I was actually interested in some of the other conditions that Councillor Campo raised, and if that's possible. No speakers. so I need
I'll take
somebody
this
to
one.
talk out.
Councillor Reeves, yeah. So basically, we could condition it to basically try and push for further solar panels on site. Oh, the storage batteries. Apologies.
It's the batteries to store the energy.
Yep, sorry.
Obviously, it's good when it's generating energy during its operation, but then you then store it for use when it's no longer, like, obviously generating the amount of power it needs at night, for example.
So yeah, I think we could condition that in terms of details for the battery storage.
Oh, okay, great. So that could be done.
Potentially,
And then we could write something for that. So great. That would be definitely something that I'd be really interested in adding as a condition if we were to go forward, if we're minded to go forward. Thank you very much. I also want to commend, I know we talked about it, and maybe I'm on my soapbox again about everyone knows about affordable housing. I might get labelled with this actually if I keep going about affordable housing, but you wouldn't be surprised that I actually wrote down all the figures again and had a look at them, and like a little bit of data. And I've got to say, I was actually really reasonably impressed, and I'm happy to see, in comparison to the previous application, and I know we shouldn't really be comparing them, but I can't help but compare them. And actually looking at this one, you know, I've got to commend the developer on actually understanding where the need is and actually looking at housing rather than just apartment blocks and getting the mix more skewed towards the 3 and 4 bedroom houses, because there are families out there, and I've met families that are in apartments that have got like 3 children or need bigger houses, you know, need the 4 bedroom as well. So we can't forget that there are needs, especially I know a family that basically couldn't get into a property but had a special needs a child. You couldn't carry them up the stairs, but they needed the extra bedrooms and they just couldn't get access to that within an affordable housing framework. So I think seeing that mix has kind of really is a positive. Can you explain, it was said that the garden sizes, just for clarification, 269 out of the 330 had appropriate size gardens. Can you just clarification about the nature of the other 60 or 61, why they don't meet that requirement? Doesn't have to be very detailed, but like, can you summarize that for me and conceptualize it, please?
Yeah, it's basically a numerical value. So in terms of the square meterage, they fell below the requirement. But in terms of the overall size and depth, we felt that there were, you know, good, adequate sized gardens for future occupiers.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for clarity, or we can go into debates? Councillor Gersing first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the speakers, Ward Councillor and Belway, Rob. I just wanted to check about these 2 conditions, other conditions that were suggested. They seem quite sensible. There's one regarding the Swift boxes and back boxes and stuff. Is that something that I didn't see in the conditions? Is that something that we can add on as an additional condition? And also the other condition. What was the other one? The other one was sorry. Batteries we already got. Batteries, and there was the additional landscaping and screening. So we have the separation between the houses. Could we have that included within the conditions as well? I mean, if we are minded to approve.
We can condition those, yeah.
Can do that, yeah. Okay, that's good. Thank you. That's sensible. Yeah, I'll listen to the rest of the debate. But yeah, thank you. That's good notice.
Councillor Cashmere Singh, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just a couple of points. It's mentioned that 10 houses have a provision for self or purpose build. How much of that is going to be people who want that built? Is it just sort of the internal or external? Because a lot of times it's just, you know, kitchens and bathrooms. Because a lot of families live in this area who are multi-generational. And we have the issue with elderly people going into homes which we don't have enough accommodation. So if their families want to have their grandparents or someone stay, they could have 1 or 2 bedrooms downstairs. How much input can a purchaser have into that home?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm just reviewing the section 106, and I'll come back to you in a second.
Councillor Reeves.
Oh, yeah. So the tree officer mentioned concerns over the well, they mentioned concerns over the survival of retained trees, but then talked about concerns over the canopy coverage for some rear gardens. Can I understand, does that mean that they were saying that it could get there'd be too much canopy for the rear gardens, and is that of existing trees or new trees? It literally was just almost like in one sentence, it just said, concerns over canopy coverage for some rear gardens.
Yep.
Do you know what that means,
Yep.
please, in real terms for me? So if you can come back about that, please. When we're talking about trees, thank you for doing what I asked for on the last one, which was to actually bring up the whole mix of trees that they're intending on planting, because by looking at that, I could see that there was a lot more maturity in their aim around the tree planting than the previous application.
Thank you, councillor. I could come back to you on the tree canopy coverage. So that's the existing trees in those rear gardens, and we felt that it wouldn't impact the usability of those spaces. So we're just highlighting concerns by the officer.
So it was concerns that it was going to be overtly canopy coverage over the gardens that would...
One portion of the gardens.
Yeah, which then would effectively in some way kill off the gardens.
Yeah, and we feel it doesn't as officers,
I've
because
had
it could still...
a big massive tree in the garden and it just killed the whole rear of the garden. So, okay, thanks.
I'm still just looking at that point. Yeah, 1 second, sorry.
Yes, obviously, this is in floodplain 1213, and how the developers supposed to overcome the floodplain, especially is from the river. And my other thing is, obviously, they're saying that they're going to make the houses 80% energy efficient. Why not 100% energy efficient? Because that will, we can achieve our CO2 and biodiversity net gain. And obviously, we're going to lose a lot of trees, wildlife there. So I think they should do something to improve the energy efficiency, making the house 100% energy efficient.
Okay. Mohammed, I don't know if you caught Councillor Bra's question there, but she had questions about the houses being in flood zone 1, 2 and 3. You could do an explanation on that, and also about the energy efficiency being 80%, not 100. I think that's kind of been covered with Councillor Reeves.
So I can cover this. So all the houses are in flood zone 1, which is not a flood zone. That was the primary issue that was dealt with at the appeal. So there's no houses located that would be at risk of flooding. In terms of the energy efficiency, this is one of the matters that was dealt with at the appeal. And as I often say, when we go to appeal, there's risks that inspectors reach different views to what we might reach as the local planning authority on things. So normally we would seek to have a development be carbon zero and secure any shortfall through an offset contribution. That was a matter that was discussed at the appeal, and the didn't agree with that view and didn't uphold it. So dealing with the reserve matters, we are bound by what the inspector said. What the inspector's deliberation did do was talk about future building regulations and future standards, which is why the officers and the applicant have worked together to push things to around 80%, which is where the future home standard, which isn't in place yet, will be. But given the appeal decision and the fact that the inspector didn't require 100% or the offset, we can't push that any further dealing with this reserve matters.
Can I come back?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, on this one, it's the inspector's decision, but future development can be pushed for 100% energy efficient homes.
So obviously it's a point not related to this application.
No, I'm just asking you a question.
We deal with the applications in line with the SPD, which seeks for developments to either be 100%, or if they can't make 100%, for there to be an offset contribution. So on every application, we take that SPD into account. But on this one, we are bound by the decision that the inspector made on the outline on the matters of principle and what to include in the legal agreement. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions? Councillor Singh?
Yes, just want to pick up the question Councillor Reeves asked about the 61 houses, about 20% whose gardens are going to be smaller than the others. What percentage will they be to what they should be?
Unfortunately, I have that to hand in terms of numerical value. I guess we could potentially look at that, but I'll have to come back to you on that.
If you could, thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got nobody on monitor at all. Councillor Reeves? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I've read through it and taken into account a lot of these, and I'm aware of what occurred on the previous application for the outline application, because I was on the panel there, and I know what happened there, and also obviously through the appeal process as well in that regard. And what we're obviously looking at here is the mass and the scale and the that's being proposed to us, and for me, a lot of that resides around the percentage of the types of property and where they are, and also importance around that is some of the things that were brought up around the energy efficiency as well. So, I mean, I think that the also looking at the way that the layout was, it was nice to see that there's a separate cycle and pedestrian path that is separated from the road as well, at the entrance and then through past the school. I think that's very important from the school site, from a safety perspective. And I quite like the conditions as well, because I think it just ties everything up, particularly around with all the trees, and there is a large area of open space that I think that things like back boxes and other things to help actually reinforce the nature being maintained and installed in there. I think that actually sits well with me as well. I looked at the percentage of affordable housing, and again, I'm quite pleased that we have, we're looking at 3-bedroom houses, 31% of them are going to be 3-bedroom houses, and another 24% are going to be 2-bedroom houses on the affordable mix. That's taking us 55% of all of them are going to be houses, and that to me is great. And to actually see that, to have 2-bedroom houses is what really people want. They can grow from there, and then also for those that have got established families, the 3-bedroom houses, and then even into 4-bedroom houses. So I'm thinking about the way that this is what we're looking at and those considerations. I think I'm happy to put forward a motion that we actually go forward with the recommendation to accept this proposal on the basis that we can establish those 3 conditions that we have, which is also the additional screening for the school. I've had experience previously with schools in Cox Green Ward, for example, firsthand with residents, and actually screening is using nature to screen actually is a really effective and important thing that we should be looking at, particularly for school sites. There's noise, but also noise pollution to help with that, but also for the enjoyment of the residents' property nearby.
Would you like the conditions to be reread?
So what I was going to say, Councillor, is that working quite a bit in the background, that James has put together a wording of the 3 additional conditions
Yeah,
that
sure.
Councillor Del Campo mentioned.
Yes.
So James can read them out and then you'd be happy to accept, if that would be the.
Yeah, I'll listen to them. I
Yeah.
mean, I know the premise of them, but yeah, if you can read the exact conditions, that
Or
would
should
be
we do that one,
great.
see if we've got a seconder, just. You would like to second, Councillor Waters?
I mean, if we can hear the conditions, hear them, just to make sure they're on point, then yes, that'd be great.
Okay, let's read the condition. I do have 2 more speakers. Is it related to anything else outside this motion? So that's,
I was gonna support the motion, but I'm happy to give way to Councillor Waters if you want to be second.
okay. I'll get out between yourselves. Councillor Waters or Councillor Singh, who's seconding?
Yeah, did you want a second? Yes, good man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Brar, have you got anything to add before we go through?
I just wanted to sort of, say, obviously in this proposal, there was a school, primary school. So obviously that'd be a separate application. But in the meantime, if the houses are built, how are we going to cope with the extra pressure for schooling, doctor surgeries? Is there anything in the development to alleviate that problem?
So, I mean, I think I have to deal with this question through reference to the outline application. That's where the provisions were secured and agreed in relation to the transfer of the school site. So effectively, that is in line with the details that were agreed between the council and felt acceptable by the planning inspector at the time. So there is, I won't go into too much detail, but there's a trigger point in the 106 to do with the transfer of the land to the council, and the council will provide the school at the time it thinks appropriate. That trigger point was the point that was felt appropriate for the need. So there's nothing on the site to deliver school places in advance of that, because the decision was that that was the right trigger, but it's not something we can revisit at reserve matters stage. So.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Singh, did you want to go now?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say something on it. I mean, I was on the original application, which was refused. I mean, this has been quite a contentious site for a number of years, and it's been a difficult fight. It was approved at appeal. The principle has been established, and obviously we're just looking at reserve matters here: appearance, landscaping, layout, scale, and just looking at those items alone, I think it's a good design. It's as good as we could have got. Officers have worked very, very hard, as have the applicant and councillors, to get a decent scheme there. There's good separation there. What this will allow, I mean, there's acute need of housing in this area. Alderbury Road, first plat, the people and the Riverside ward, Councillor Singh, my colleague, mentioned, there is a desperate need of housing. People are living multi-generational in the area, and this will allow families to stay and live together, and children. So yeah, very supportive of that, supportive of the primary school. Hopefully look forward to seeing that application come forward in due course. And you know, we've had 3 additional conditions added on this evening, 30 conditions on the site. We've got a considerate contractor and a developer on this. So yeah, I'm very supportive of this, and hopefully it's going to be agreed unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. James, can I just go to you with the conditions, because you were next on that one?
Yes, we've got 3 additional conditions to be added. So the first condition is the landscaping. So we've drafted up, notwithstanding the plans hereby approved and prior to the occupation and development, a scheme of landscaping screening along the boundary of the school land of at least 2.5 metres in height should be submitted to the local planning authority in writing for approval. The development should not be occupied until this boundary is provided in full and retained in accordance with the details thereafter approved. And the reason for that, to satisfy the test under paragraph 57 of the framework, is to safeguard the amenities of the environment. Right, 1 down, 2 to go. Condition 2. So prior to the development above ground level, a scheme of ecological enhancements to specifically provide the provision of swift bricks, bird and bat boxes shall be submitted to the local planning authority in writing for approval. The details shall be implemented prior to the first occupation of the development and retained as such at all times thereafter. I'll just tweak that number 2, saying prior to the first occupation of the residential unit, because there'll be obviously bat boxes on the different properties. And the reason for that is to enhance the ecological value of the site. And then last but not least, condition number 3, prior to the development above slab level, details of battery storage designed to retain energy generated from the relevant property's solar panels shall be submitted to the local planning authority in writing for approval. The development shall not be occupied until the details That wasn't an electric car, was it? The development shall not be occupied until the details hereby approved have been provided in full. The battery serving each property shall be retained in accordance with these details approved and in working order at all times thereafter. And the necessity for that condition is to enhance the sustainable credentials of the site and promote energy resilience within the development.
Between the housing station, the school site.
No, that's the first one.
Oh, that was the first one. Okay, sorry, I must have heard it. Thank you.
Yes, all 3. You happy with that, Councillor Milton? Yeah, I'm happy with those. That's everything. But we said that obviously with council approval, that can we use that to the relevant officers, like ecology officers and
Yeah, so obviously the officers would make a judgment on ecological matters.
And I know the
ecologists.
sustainability team as well. I presume will make the judgment on the storage and the battery elements.
Right.
Okay, so it'll be the relevant officers at the council. Okay. Yeah, I'm happy with that as the conditions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask Adrian about the trigger point for the school. Do we have a figure of how many properties up when they're built that the council has to start building the school? Because there is quite a shortage of primary and junior places already in the First Plat and Riverside.
I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but it will be specified in the legal agreement, which will be published on the public portal for the outline application. So I can't answer right now, and it's probably not worth spending meeting time looking for it, but we can provide it to you afterwards if that's helpful.
If you can email that to me, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rees, anything you want to add before we go to the vote?
Yeah,
So
just for clarification, if I understand it, it's actually handing over the land for the primary site, primary school. It's no obligation. It's not a requirement to build a school. Can we just get that clarified? It's the handover of the land to the borough.
That's correct. The handover to the borough has to happen at a certain time, and then the borough will build the school at the time it feels it's needed to meet the needs.
Right.
Thank you very much. That sounds for the clarification. And there was just one thing. It's just niggling because we won't get to talk about it otherwise. It was just the council housing officer's comment, because obviously a lot of my proposal was around the housing and the scope and etc. It said the council housing officer, and this is 10.1.10.1.12. Housing officer raised concerns regarding the unit type 2 times 5-bed houses for the social rent to accommodate larger families by submitting substituting the 3-bedroom houses along with a 5-bed having a capacity of at least 7 persons. However, the unit types are in accordance with the legal agreement with the officers consider appropriate. The council's housing officer also recommended that the proposed 4-bed unit should provide 6-person capacity instead of 5. The applicant submitted an amended plan to address this recommendation, and the property has been renamed the Parkman. Does that mean that the Parkman, which it's been called, that is now for a 6-person capacity, 4-bedroom 6-person capacity house? So they have changed that layout to meet that requirement. You're nodding, so I'll take that as yes. And then I didn't see in the table any mention of the 5-bed houses. It goes up to 4-bed houses. But there is mention in that paragraph about 2 5-bed houses for social rent to accommodate larger families by substituting 3-bed houses along with a 5-bed. So which have you reduced the 3-bed housings, the 3-bed housing social rent figures? You've got 22 units. Has that been reduced to allow for these 2 5-bed houses for social rent? And therefore we can assume the 2 5-bed social rent houses are included in that mix.
Thank you, Councillor Reed. Just refreshing my memory on this as well. So basically, the 2 5-bed houses for social rent, which is what the housing officer raised concerns about. This is paragraph 10.112, isn't it? Yeah. So the council's housing officer raised concerns regarding the unit type, 2 5-bed houses for social rent to accommodate larger families by substituting a 3-bed house along with a 5-bed having capacity of at least 7 persons. However, the unit types are in accordance with legal agreement, which officers consider appropriate. So for that reason, that tweak hasn't been made.
Oh, it hasn't been made.
So the council's housing officer also recommend that the proposed 4-bed unit should provide 6-person occupancy instead of 5-person. The applicant has submitted an amended plan to address that part.
Yeah, that second part of the paragraph is fine because that's called the parkman.
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure. It didn't clarify when I read that what has actually happened. It says that they had concern regarding the unit type. Is that they wanted 2 5-bed houses for social rent?
Yes.
And they're not getting them? Is that what you're telling me?
Yep, they wanted 2 5-bed houses for social rent instead of the 3-bed houses.
Instead of
the 3-bed.
Substituting some of the 3-bed houses to accommodate
that's
2
my
5-beds. And that hasn't been done then?
No, because it's what's been submitted, the unit types is in accordance with the legal agreement. So that mix is what we're following as part of the outline, which is
we
what's been
couldn't
agreed
get
secured.
the developer to agree to that then?
Well,
did we even approach them and ask them, or?
I think the fact that they've got a registered provider in place and then the housing mix has been agreed and secured in the section 106 is what the parameters and the outline is what we're following.
It's a shame because I think obviously if the housing officer's asking for it, then there obviously must be a need for it. And so maybe if the housing officer does ask, it would be good to maybe try and see if we can push to get that. It's not going to change my proposal, but I want to if somebody, the whole point is we're trying to meet the requirements of the housing market, and we were talking about that just previously earlier tonight, and I just want to see when a housing officer raises that as a concern that we can try and see if we can try and meet that. It's a small thing on 330 houses to just lose a couple of the 3-beds to meet the need of the borough and the borough residents. So if we can take that on board, that would be appreciated. And I'd like to go forward with my proposal as has been read out. And if you want to go to a vote, then it's up to you. Sorry, Chair. Through you, Chair. I'd like to hand over to you.
Happy to go and proceed with the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so we have a motion on the table to authorise planning in line with officer recommendations proposed by Councillor Reeves, seconded by Councillor Waters, with the additional 3 conditions that have been read out by the planning officer. I will ask councillors if they are for approval, against approval, or abstaining from the vote. Councillor Bra. Councillor Douglas. Councillor Martin.
For.
Councillor Reeves. Councillor Kashmir Singh. Councillor Gurj Singh. Councillor Walters. So that's 4-4, Chair, 3 absent, so the motion carries.
So that brings me on to the last item, but it is past 9 o'clock, so can I?
If you ask the room if they wish to vote, then
Yes.
we can vote.
Yes. So by the constitution, it's 9 o'clock, so we would vote to continue. So if we do a name vote on that, shall we? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So I would be taking a name vote whether councillors are for continuing, against continuing, or abstaining from the vote. Councillor Bra.
Sorry.
It's for continuing the meeting, against continuing the meeting. So 4? 4. Councillor Douglas. Councillor Martin.
4.
Councillor Reeves. Councillor Kashmir Singh. Councillor Gertz Singh. Councillor Walters. That is set, 6-4-1 against, so the motion
Okay.
carries, but the meeting continues.
Thank you. So that brings us on to the final item, which is application number 24/02036 Braywick House. If I could hand over to Mohammed again to do the presentation. Sorry, Councillor Singh?
Interest, so I should have declared at the beginning. I own property close to the site, it's just under a mile away.
Close to Braywick.
Yeah, Braywick, yeah, that's it. Just wanted to declare it, come here with open mind. Thank you.
Thank you. So Mohammed, when you're ready. That's all right.
Evening again, everyone. This is item 3, Braywick House, 14 Windsor Road, Maidenhead. The proposal is for change of use of the Braywick House from offices, use class E, to Ascend School, use class F1, with minor external alterations and internal alterations, including reconfiguration of the parking spaces, 2 replacement escape fire stairs, and new boundary treatment and a new play space. In terms of the updates, we've amended condition 23, which relates to the playground use. So we're amending the hours to match those of the use, its operating hours to allow greater flexibility for the play space. There have been no objections raised by environmental pollution, the pollution officers regarding the play space in relation to the nearby residential properties and their amenities. So we've amended it as you can see on the screen in terms of the hours. So 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Saturdays, and no other times on Sundays or bank holiday public holidays. Overview of the recommendation. So the site accommodates a grade 2 listed building along with a modern building which are vacant offices. The change of use to Ascend School is supported in this location, which complies with policy IF6 of the Borough Local Plan. The council identifies that there is a need to supply additional support within the borough for EHCP children. The loss of the office space is considered acceptable based on the detailed marketing evidence for over 12 months, which meets policy ED3 requirements, which is detailed in a further slide. The proposal would involve minimal internal alteration to the historic building and more substantial internal remodeling of the modern block, modern office building. The alterations are considered acceptable and no objections have been raised by the Conservation Area Officer or Historic England. The external alterations with a play space and pick-up and drop-off area within the existing hard standing would not have a harmful impact on the setting of the listed building. Highway officers have raised no objections to trip generation and parking provisions subject to a travel plan secured via Section 106 agreement and relevant conditions, which are also outlined in a further slide. The loss of 10 trees is considered acceptable. No objections have been raised by tree officers. There are another 20 trees being replanted as part of the BNG net gain. And 2 representations have been received which recommend a new crossing for the school to slow traffic. This has been addressed in the report and supported by conditions. Overall, the assessment of development has found that harms of such a significant nature do not exist that would outweigh the benefits associated with the proposed development. So overview of the location and setting. So in terms of location and setting, the site is accessed from Windsor Road. The site is 1.4 miles from Maidenhead Town Centre. It's a grade 2 listed building and is set within the residential area to the north and west of the site. The listed building is outlined with the red circle, and open space of the site would accommodate the play space to the south. So here we have a street scene, Braywick House West, which is a listed building, and the modern block Braywick House East. And here we have an image of the open space to the south of the site, adjacent to the proposed play space. This is the colour-coded aerial view, so you can see which part is which period. So you've got the 17th century in blue, 18th century in green, 19th century orange, and the pink is the 1980s block. Specific planning matters. So in terms of Sen School, is a community facility, considered community facility, and is outlined by the BLP, Borough Local Plan, and complies with policy IF6. The need is justified given the expected rise in the number of children with EHCP needs and the need to supply additional support within the borough. The loss of office, robust marketing evidence has been supplied, demonstrates there has been no interest, and this complies with the Borough Local Plan policy ED3. So in terms of loss of office, here we have a table that shows the active marketing requirements required by Appendix D of the Borough Local Plan and how this has been met. And in terms of design and heritage, we've got internal alterations to the building, very minimal in nature, where there's a glass sort of perspex surround being added to the fireplace. And also the proposal involves magnetic locks to 6 of the existing doors around the main staircase to isolate this. It protects the existing staircase and also prevents day-to-day use by the children. External alterations largely maintain the existing hard landscaping within the proposed car parking space along the front of the building. The existing planters will be removed for a drop-off pickup zone with the rest of the parking retained. This will not result in any impact on the character and setting of the listed building, as the proposal continues to maintain the hard landscaped areas. The southern part of this car park area will be allocated as a new playground, which is not considered to impact the setting of the listed building. In terms of transport, officers have not raised concerns, highway officers have not raised concerns regarding the number of trips in terms of the free flow of pedestrian vehicle movements on the highway network. There is a shortfall of 40 spaces in the parking provision. 95 spaces are required, but highway officers consider that this can be addressed via conditions which relate to car park management plan, turning layouts, and the school travel plan, which is also being secured by Section 106. So this would secure management of the site and the potential impact on the highway with suitable spaces for the vehicles being provided. In terms of trees, you've got 22 trees in order to facilitate installation of the mesh fencing to the south of the building. So these 22 trees would be pruned, not removed, and the removal of 10 small individual trees, which 9 of these fall under category C and 1 within category U, and removal of block paving directly north of the site and expand its planter to increase its rooting environment, which is considered acceptable. In terms of ecology, the proposal meets 10% of the on-site gains, which is considered satisfactory, considered significant gains in terms of the assigned medium distinctiveness of the site. In terms of the conclusion, here we have the benefits and harm. So provision of Sen School, that's the benefit within the borough. Preservation and enhancement of listed buildings, significant portion of the soft landscaping areas maintained, and sustainability efficiencies to be provided to reduce CO2 emissions. Planting of 20 trees as part of the BNG. Harms a loss of the office space, some reduction in landscaping area, and a loss of 10 trees, which are the C and U category trees. So subject to recommended conditions and a signed legal agreement, the application would adhere to the borough local plan policies. There is a need for a Sen School, and a loss of office is justified within the robust marketing evidence. There are no adverse harms that would outweigh the benefits when assessed against benefits of the scheme as a whole. The proposed associated internal external alteration would not result in harm to the fabric and setting of the listed building. So the recommendation is to approve the application subject to conditions and a legal agreement. That concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Mohammed. I've got one speaker on this one, and that's Emma Patchell, please. When you're ready, you've got 3 minutes and a 1-minute warning. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Emma from Gillings Planning, the agent for this application. Given the very detailed committee report and presentation you've just had, I just have some very short points I would like to make. The proposal will provide a Sen School on a sustainable site and bring this current vacant building back into a long-term use. The school will be operated by Polaris, who support young people with social, emotional, and mental health difficulties. They aim to provide safe and nurturing environments for all children, helping them to grow, shape their lives, and achieve their full potential. Only minor internal and external changes are proposed to Braywick House, as you've heard, and this will help to provide this much needed school to this area, and it does not impact the setting of the listed building or result in any substantial harm. The existing hard surfacing around the building will be used for parking, providing acceptable levels for both staff and visitors, with no impact on highway safety. A travel plan will further secure this via Section 106. The applicant is also in agreement to a contribution towards achieving net zero carbon at the site, which can be agreed further through a Section 106. As noted in your committee report, all technical consultees support the scheme, subject to conditions which are all agreed. We have worked proactively with Historic England and the Council through pre-application discussions and also during the application process to resolve any issues raised as quickly as possible. I therefore respectfully request that you please support this application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Orders?
I support this application, Chairman. These SEND children, will they be local SEND children? Is this going to be for them? Are they going to be coming from outside the Royal Borough?
Hi, councillor. My understanding it's local within the borough.
Say again?
So my understanding is it's the children are within the borough, so they're local.
So they're local?
That's my understanding.
Children. Your understanding? Does anybody know?
I can double check.
All right, well, it's quite an important point. The other thing is the parking is a bit on the low side, to say the least, but you reckon the travel plan and all that will make up for that. And the fact, that for people, that's probably all right. And make sure, please, officers, if you keep the trees and as many, shrubbery, not too many fences and that, but it's quite a nice area just there. That Braywick house is quite nice, a long time ago. So let's keep it in a sort of very rural state. But I am quite happy. Well, I don't know. Those officers' recommendation. Yeah. Yeah, officers' recommendation. It's something to debate. Yeah.
Thank you. That's
Thank you, Chair. I just want to check with the officers, is the fencing or the walls going to be high enough? Because it is a main road for the safety of the SEND children. Little concerned that the parking is almost half of what is required. It's 40 spaces short, it's supposed to be 95. And if that can be adequately dealt with, minded to second Councillor Walter's motion.
Have you answered on the parking?
Hi, councillor. Yeah, so basically, highways officers reviewed this and they were comfortable with the fact that a school travel plan and car parking management plan and turning layout being provided. On that basis, they were satisfied that this shortfall could be addressed.
Right. What about the fencing or the walls? So there's gates there because these are vulnerable children. Will that be of sufficient to make sure that they're secure in, when they're attending that school?
I think we're straying into matters that are beyond the scope of the planning meeting. So it would obviously be for the school and the school provider to comply with their health and safety requirements and make sure that the fencing was adequate. If the fencing that they've got planning permission for any reason wasn't adequate or there was a change in circumstances, then it would be for them to apply, but I've got no reason to believe it wouldn't be, and to operate they'd need to make sure they had a safe environment. So I think we can take comfort from that.
Thank you.
Councillor Douglas, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check with you first? Are we still in sort of asking clarification? Because we've already got a motion and might even be seconded. Are we still? I have a clarification question first of all, yeah, for Mohammed, if I may. So, just to double check, so we're talking about a 40 car shortfall, but is there also a 6 minibus shortfall? Did I read that correctly in the report?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to second the motion, just saying that this is which is very much needed in the Royal Borough. So I will second Councillor.
I think Councillor Cashmere Singh's already seconded this one.
Oh, all right, okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we've
Oh,
got-
I'm sorry.
I've got Councillor Walters and seconded by Councillor Cashmere Singh
Okay, no problem.
at the moment, yeah?
No problem.
So I don't actually have anybody else speak on my screen to speak, so I'm happy to move to a vote. Oh, God, you just popped up, sorry, Councillor
That's
Gershing.
all right, yeah, I think I'll speak. I mean, we've got to have a little bit of a debate on this one, I suppose. We can't just go straight to the vote. But I mean, this is a really good thing. This building's been empty for a number of years. It's an office development and yeah, they couldn't rent it. They couldn't sell it. So this is brilliant. Yeah, I see this anticipated rise, 19% in young children, young people with emotional health and care plans. And, you know, going on of yesterday's full council meeting where we've put this additional funding in and we've increased capacity at Forest Bridge, which is across the road. I remember I was on that planning committee all those years ago when that was approved and built. And in not so many years, I mean, we're in need of another school. So this is really good. And I, you know, look forward to seeing the development here by Polaris. And yeah, that'd be really good. But I'm happy to support it. Unless there's anything in the debate that comes out that sways me. But I don't know. Thank you. Just
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Douglas again, please.
Thank you, Chair, yeah. I mean, I'll keep my comments very brief. I think there are some harms here. I've read the report very carefully, and I think there are harms. There's the loss of the office space. Obviously, that's mitigated by the fact it's not in use. It can't let it out, as Councillor Singh's just mentioned. There's some minor harm to some trees with low importance. But I mean, the one that stands out for me in terms of harms is really the parking. You know, if I was going to be concerned about the application overall, the serious shortfall in parking and the location of this site, I mean, it's right on the motorway effectively. It's absolutely, I mean, if your kids are going to that school, it's very attractive to drive there. It's not particularly attractive to get the train, which is 20 minutes walk away. So I suspect there is going to be pressure on that parking. But having said that, it's really, really good news that there's a viable use for this site, this beautiful building. And it's not just a viable use, it's something that we need to send kids, you know, they're desperately in need of. And it's fantastic that it's going to be coming to this location. So, I mean, for me overall, I mean, unless something comes out, you know, in the remaining time in the comments, I'm, you know, well into the approve column at the moment. I'll be happy to support Councillor Walters' motion. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I've read through this. The obvious benefit it's been said, and I think is a great thing to actually utilise this building and put it to the use of SEN. It's very important that we need that provision, and I can see the huge benefit in that. Again, my only reservation was about, excuse me, well, there were two things I wanted to talk about. One was about the transport. We have in Cox Green Ward, we have Manor Green School, which is obviously of huge importance to children that have SEN provision or that need additional support. We have huge traffic issues with that school, in and out of that school, because the vulnerable children, those children are coming in one by one. They're being brought in by taxis, or they're being brought in on their own, in their own transport, and it is a multiplication, and it is, you know, a mathematical calculation of how many then cars have to queue up to get in and get out. I think the differential here is obviously we don't have a one-lane filter which goes under the bridge, which causes issues unique to Manor Green. and it's a dual carriageway. But I also know that when people are going in and out, it's right by the roundabout. People come round there, and there's a potential, if it was to spill out onto the dual carriageway element of Braywick Road, that would be my concern. And I just wanted that to be alleviated, or for you to explain, because we kind of just skipped over it a little bit. Is the turning, the drop-off process that's planned for there? Because I see there's a circular, when you go in, there's like a circular, almost like area at the front, in front of the historic. So just can you just show me again what's the proposal on how that's going to be managed? Because that to me is the important element about the parking and the traffic issue, is to understand that part of it. And there was also one other thing, which was the opening hours on Saturday. I'm trying to understand why a school needs to be open on a Saturday. So could you please explain was there a rationale given for those hours on the Saturday, please?
Thanks, Councillor Reeves. Just in relation to that query, the last one, about the opening hours, my understanding is that there might be some clubs or events on a Saturday, and we feel that those hours would cover that, so that's acceptable in our opinion. Yeah, that's our understanding from. Yeah. No, that's our understanding on that point. Yep. And just going back to the number of trips. So paragraph 10.84 of the report outlines that in terms of the number of trips, officers don't have any concerns in terms of the free flow of traffic, pedestrian vehicle movements on the highway network, and it's in comparison to the existing office use. So highway officers have looked at it in terms of what the existing use is, and it's no greater than what would have happened with the offices. So in that respect, they felt it's acceptable for those number of trips and vehicles going in and out the site.
If I could just go back just briefly, because we're just conversing on it. So I'm looking at 10.83, and it talks about the submitted transport statement that they made, which outlines what they believe is the transport. So 10 minibuses transporting 77 pupils to the school. So we understand that they're going to be running their own transportation. That's where the minibuses come in, because I mean, I know that that's not a natural thing to occur. So, or is that just part of their assessment of what independent transport will be provided to take 77 of the pupils to the school? Because that does relieve a lot of the impact. Is those minibuses, is that run by Polaris, or is it they're relying on independent taxi minibuses for that?
Yep. So we don't have an answer for whether they're running those minibuses or it's by someone else or individually, but all we know is that 10 minibuses will be transporting 77 children to the school.
Okay.
So we haven't got that information in terms of who's actually operating it.
Yeah, I think it's important sometimes to have that information, because if that is just they're relying on independent, then that is a reliance on that. And if that doesn't occur, then you'll have 77 children coming via other forms of transport. So I think that's kind of important information, that when we have these type of applications on transport plans, so just delve and get a bit more detail behind something as important as where those minibuses or how they're going to be operated. Because if it's from them, then there's more of a reassurance that that's going to actually happen. Do you understand where I'm going with that?
Yes, noted. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much.
I think wouldn't condition 12 and 13 cover some of those issues that Councillor Reeves mentioned anyway, that it's in the report already? Yeah. Councillor Gerge saying, and then we'll go to the vote.
Yeah, thank you. It was just a request. I just wanted to ask Councillor Walters. I know they've got like 24 conditions on the site, there's lots of conditions on there. But some of these talk about sort of like external lighting and drainage and stuff. And would it be, because I know this building is, one of the reasons it wasn't let as office space was because of the energy consumption. I mean, could we request a condition on there, something requesting solar panels, which would help with energy efficiency? Is that something that can be requested? Would you consider adding it? Through your chair, sorry.
I was just going to go to Jones, but it's got listed status, hasn't it, for some of it? So.
So sitting aside this is a listed building application, 'cause obviously it's a listed building. And what we wouldn't normally do is require something via condition that would then trigger a subsequent consent. So if you put solar panels on a listed building, you need listed building consent and potentially planning consent, depending on where you are. So we normally not do that, but we have, correct me if I'm wrong, Mohammed, got a sustainability condition on there.
Okay.
So there are other ways of achieving that.
Okay.
It won't be
no,
to the
fair
same extent as a non-listed building because of the constraints it is, but you can enhance that from there, basically. So
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're ready to go to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so we have a motion on the table to grant planning permission in line with officer recommendation proposed by councillor Walters, seconded by councillor Kashmir Singh. I will now ask members if they are for approval, against approval, or abstaining from the vote. Councillor Bra. Councillor Douglas. Councillor Martin. Councillor Reeves. Councillor Kashmir Singh. Councillor Gertch Singh. Councillor Walters. That is unanimous, Chair. The motion carries.
Thank you. So that brings me on to the final agenda item, which is the planning appeals. Are we happy to, there's two sets, actually. I've just been reminded because we missed one last meeting. Are we happy with both sets of planning appeals, which would have been from, I need the meeting dates.
One was on the 20th of March when the meeting got adjourned.
Yeah, from the one was from the adjournment meeting from last time. So if anyone needs some time to have a quick look at those, then. Yeah, we missed one set of appeals because we adjourned the meeting. So the ones from the last meeting, so there's two sets that would, if we're happy to note those, let me know.
Can we get the next meeting to have these?
It's literally noting the last thing. There's no other, all we need to do at the moment is, are we happy to note the appeals? And then that's the last agenda item. We all happy?
Appeals.
Sorry, I couldn't cut
The
you.
officers have been quite successful looking through the appeal things.
Yeah. So if we're all happy, that's the meeting closed. Thank you.